Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wednesday Night Magic here at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store out of the beautiful, snowy, wintry Buffalo Grove, Illinois. I'm Diamond Striker alongside Jack.
What is happening? How did we get here? How are we in the back? This doesn't make any sense.
Now, everybody, welcome Jack. The lovely May is out working MagicCon Chicago. So if you're a big fan of Chicago, you're going to see tons of Nerd Rage Gaming and the folks you see here on the streams out at MagicCon because we're in that Chicagoland area. It's going to be local for these folks. And speaking of locals, we got Sudeep on the left side, rocking that black-white blink, as folks are calling it, not giving it all none of those other names. And Mike Ryan playing Esper Oculus, which is, if you take the Ketchermos package and you take the Oculus package and you make it to Kiss, you got Mike Ryan's deck.
I think that Mike's in a really good spot right now trying to fit the Ketchermos into a deck that already has an established archetype, knowing how to play the cards, what he wants to see in certain matchups. A new deck always has that struggle, right? How do you fit into the meta? What are you good against? What are you bad against? It's really nice for Mike to be able to know, okay, I'm trying to do this Oculus thing, and if they have the Leyline of the Void, I just have Ketchermos.
Right. The part that's going to be the hardest is Sudeep, for having his natural inherent synergy for his deck, is main decking Relic of Progenitus. What that means for Mike is he should know up front from this turn one that the Unearth Oculus plan is a no-go for this game.
Sudeep will play the entire game with this mana up minimum so that he can exile his yard whenever he needs, if he's ever even close to getting to where he needs to be to cast that Oculus.
Yes. And what's going to be interesting is if we ever get to the situation, and we should highlight it for folks who don't know, Ketchermos, the New Dawn, is the most popular card by far out of Aether Drift, being played by players here locally tonight, being highlighted by both of these players, so that's why they're out here for feature match number 1. But what's going to be interesting is if we ever get in a scenario where both of these players have a Ketchermos in play, because Ketchermos, in this draw ability for exiling happening, is only on your own turn. So it's going to make both of these decks that kind of want to interact on instant speed to sorcery speed to gain their value, but you're trying to stop each other. So it'll be a really big tug-of-war in this match.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely going to come down to, in the end, who has more resources to remove the others. So, like, Mike has access to Counterspell. He has access to all this high-value blue interaction, whereas Sudeep has to rely on things like Solitude and, random interaction like Ava and Mind Sensor, being able to, or even Interrupter.
Interrupter, yeah.
Sorry, all these birds out there.
It's going to be hard, right? Because Sudeep's entire strategy is the fact that he is going to play this black-white creature deck to gain his value, where Mike is going to supplement his black-white value with the controlling part of what this deck's core is as a blue-black deck. And typically, this match has been good for black-white, But what we see happening here is Sudeep is no longer has an Aether Vial, not getting a value that way, and Mike is going to be able to kind of keep pace of counterspell and interaction slowly because Sudeep isn't generating tons of value. Sudeep's generating just a little at a time.
This black-white deck reminds me a lot of goblins. You have your
This is the ringleader,
yeah,
right?
exactly. You have your ringleader, you have your flicker wisps, which are kind of like your matrons. They don't tutor for what you need, but they reset the ability on ETB.
Mm,
Being able to like turn off your opponent's lands, like that's not a thing that goblins has, but being able to have a trawler in your mana base is so good. And this deck actually plays main deck trawler just because of how good a bog is in the main.
yes. And we see two important things here. Sudeep grabbing a Flicker Wisp off this Overlord of the Baelmerk, and Sudeep missing a land drop, which means Sudeep wants this Flicker Wisp to be able to try to flicker this Overlord and gain that mass amount of value, but doesn't have that final piece and that third land drop to get there. But the other option was Felia, not great when your opponent knows about it, and White Orchid Phantom that Sudeep can't cast because of the swamp in play. So it's a real like between a rock and a rock. There's no hard spot. It's just all bad.
It's true. And now Mike's getting to the point where his graveyard is starting to overwhelm that relic. He actually now, because he has priority, can just cast the Oculus.
I agree. I was like, this is the window to with priority cast this.
Because now Sudeep can't crack the relic to stop the graveyard. He doesn't have any Aven Interrupter or any mana up to stifle or counter what he's doing. He just gets to resolve this Oculus and say, you can Solitude this, no
Yes.
problem.
This is Mike recognizing that this is a window to try to step on the throat of Sudeep because Sudeep is falling behind, missing land drops, having very minimal value. This allows Mike to do what he can to skyrocket ahead while he can.
And shout out to Twitch chat. Mike does have the best basics. I can concur. The only thing that I could say would be that if there was a world's best swamp in old border foil, I would love that. But there isn't. That's only in modern border, so I agree. These are some of the best basics you can find.
Sudeep using a moment here to crack his relic, exile some of that graveyard to gain re-access to Fatal Push this Abhorrent Oculus, having to find a window to get that Revolt online, and now this Overlord's ticking down, but Mike Ryan got this 2/2 mana vest, and I mean, my Oculus players always flip another Oculus, so it's time to be scared.
I was going to say this 2/2 has what feels to me like a 50-50 chance of being an Oculus, right? Like with how good the deck is at finding the other Oculus off the first one. It's kind of crazy. Now, this is also one of the
my God, that's kept Holy cow. Holy cow. That's an incredible card to just have face down to let Sudeep not be aware of. And because Ryan was relicked, there's tons of cards in exile. This Ketramos gets to battle right away.
Oh, and there's a frog to follow it up. I was gonna say, so this is the hard part about being in Mike's position is, you get like an Oculus finally into play, your opponent solitudes it, and then they ephemerate it and get rid of your other threat as well. But not being able to have that third land means Sudeep didn't have a mana to leave up, and so he had to tap out. Now Mike is in the position where he has two threats in play. Sudeep can have Solitude Ephemerate if Sudeep has it, but if he doesn't, he's just so far behind.
Yes, we know Sudeep does have Flicker Whips, so if he really wants, he can kind of get himself two value creatures in play. A real quick thing that I want to let folks know in case it ever comes up for you. Let's say Mike did not have all of those cards in exile. Because this card was face down, he could have gone to combat, attacked, and now that the card isn't a declared attacker, then flipped it. So if he was in a situation where the Ketramos couldn't have attacked, he would have had a moment to actually try to make it an attacker. And here is that Flicker Wisp for Sudeep.
Yeah, being able to like bluff through combat is an amazing part of having those cards face down. And old school morph, you can't respond to turning it face up. So there's so many Solitude here on the Flicker Wisp.
Yeah, Mike and I were talking just before this match. He took this specific Esper deck from a version they saw and played in a challenge recently because he likes Subtlety. And immediately, Subtlety coming up really big here, pitching the second one, but maybe saving Mike for a long chunk of time now.
And Subtlety, another card in the graveyard. This is just another way to slowly fill up and again, there's no relic. So there's no safety valve holding Mike back. Now Mike's in a spot where he does only have one card in hand, but if anything ever goes to exile, let's say with a Psychic Frog, he'll be able to draw a card. He does lose a life, but he has lifelink on it, so it doesn't really matter.
Yes. This is the part of now that we're truly in the battling phase, you can see Mike Ryan is going to discard a card, exile those 3 to give a frog flying, and draw a card for Ketramos.
And now, Sudeep finally finding that third land last turn, but now being so far behind. And a Geist of St. Traft!
Hey, folks, it may be 2025,
Oh.
but this is a Geist of St. Traft. Again, I was chatting with Mike right before this round started, and he goes, yeah, I have the 3 Ketramoses. I can't find the 4th, but I am playing this. And I went, oh, yeah, baby. Get it in here.
That's a card. I will say that's a card you cannot solitude, and even if it just gets in for beats, it does amazing work. I have to shout out to my brother, Diabolical.
Oh,
in the
big
chat.
shouts.
It's so good to see Cole in chat, and it's amazing to be commentating. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Dom.
Dude, welcome. We got Sudeep, looks like main phasing, getting this Flicker Wisp to regain the synergy he was looking for last turn. You can see these are kind of all of the options currently available to Sudeep. We're looking at Witch Enchanter, so if you want to get that land drop. Remember, you can't pick another Overlord. It says non-avatar. But Emperor Bone's also an incredible card, but the difficulty is just how much Mike Ryan currently has in play already.
Yeah, there might be some crazy line where he's able to like kill a Geist in combat or kill a frog and then take it and then have it for a turn, one single turn because it has a finality counter. But that may not be enough because Mike's sitting at 23 and Sudeep's at only 9.
Yeah, it looks like we have Sudeep having the value for value, right? Flicker Wisp the Overlord, find a Flicker Wisp off the Overlord, try to rinse and repeat next turn. And the Flicker Wisp is a 3/1 flyer, so if Sudeep's feeling it, could possibly try to eat up one of these frogs, even if it gets jumped. But wow, the value is already churning.
Yeah, just having the ability to, put cards in the graveyard, try to give the frog flying, doesn't even need to. Now it just swings for the fences. There should be a 4/4 Angel.
Yeah, I think Mike doesn't have a token for this Angel.
For sure. And Sudeep's probably just counting that as math. He's probably just like, well, I'm going to try, but I probably die.
Yep, we got to read Geist again. Yeah, shout out to Chatter who says, if Geist is a reader, what does the world become? Some of us have been around the block far too long.
Oh my god, the Angel will exile itself to trigger the Ketramos. That's so true.
Yo, is that the truth? Is it exile the token or stack the token? That's wild.
That's so good. It doesn't Ketramos.
Oh yeah, Ketramos says card. Oh, good. Good.
Shout out to chat.
That's one of the hardest parts about modern Magic design is sometimes they will specify card.
Truth.
And then that tokens are not cards, so even though it feels like something should work, it actually won't. So hey, thanks Twitch chat. Really appreciate the help there. Sudeep put everything in front of something, right? The Overlord might be blocking the Geist. Yeah, sure looks like it.
No, this is really hard to tell, but I would say that Sudeep doesn't have a Solitude here because of the way he's played this game. He would have gotten rid of the Ketramos before it dealt the original damage. And not having a Solitude in this deck is like the difference between winning and losing the game.
Yes. And I think if Sudeep had a Solitude, he would have Solitude before flickering the Overlord, so he could have picked up the Solitude again.
Definitely.
So it's a lot of information kind of not being leaked, but being shown to Mike through game actions that, we have the bird's eye view of taking time to process all of this. I don't have to worry about my Psychic Frog and my Geist triggers, but
exactly,
the little things are how you make the big differences in games.
And sometimes you have to take those reads and try to make those inferences, and that's the way that you win games.
So, and the issue is persisting that Sudeep is in a situation where he's behind on lands, he's now behind on creatures, he's behind on life. These are the games where you start to really feel it.
Yeah, and Mike has the ability to just keep getting redraws off the Psychic Frog and the Ketramos, and now has his own relic to trigger his Ketramos during his turn. Doesn't even have to try to hit with the frog to exile cards anymore. Can just do it right off the bat.
Yes. You can see this little inherent synergy of the Ketramos and the frog, but the relic plus Ketramos does it as well, and this allows Mike to play just good cards that work well together. And as your deck slowly moves in that direction, that typically means your deck gets better and better, right? Where if everything feels like a good play, you're in a good situation.
Exactly. And now Sudeep is in the classic Goblin situation of you have 3 drops in your hand and 3 lands, and you have to try to figure out how to survive through a turn when your opponent has played an amazing curve and still has mana up.
Yeah, and I think Sudeep's also giving a lot of information about how the match is going to feel overall, as we do find a Solitude here.
This must have been the top deck. Now, the question is, you can't hit the Geist.
Sure can't. The thing's got hexproof.
And you don't have a flyer. So you could trade with the Geist, gain 3, and then go to 1 after taking the damage. But if somehow he's able to give that Psychic Frog flying...
Uh-oh, Mike's tapping mana. Oh, we're
Yeah.
cycling. We're cycling on in.
Oh, I
Wow,
I was
dude.
really scared. I was really scared for a second. I was like, okay, he's got the counterspell.
Okay.
And
So as you're saying, Sudeep's now going to have a life linking blocker.
yes,
So if Sudeep actually gets to block, we'll have a relative 5 life total when possibly taking the 4 damage from an angel. And the Overlord can put itself in front of the Geist, as we have to assume the Solitude's going to try to hit that frog.
yeah, it's too powerful to leave on the battlefield. Also, only target that you can really hit.
Yeah, Sudeep could hit his own Overlord, but I wouldn't recommend it. You might be learning about the hexproof type route. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
We've all been there. You know, how many times have you had to reread the card that has so much text and
When was
find
the
out?
last time you played against Geist of St. Jeff?
Exactly. Back when I was playing Bushwhack, back in the day.
It's some time ago. We're gonna see these exiles going away from Mike. Drawing that card before everything goes away. Here's a Bailmerk attack from Sudeep.
Probably digging
No
for another
fear.
Solitude. If he finds another
Oh,
Ketramos,
hey,
if he has a land drop, this could be really good.
there's the cat god, but no life total to work with. So fetching, shocking, forget about it.
Yeah. And the
Oh,
Ketramos will lose you life if it triggers.
yeah, and Sudeep's got that dog in him with a Felia in hand. So, it could possibly be another flash blocker for trying to take out the Geist.
I like that. I like that.
Another Overlord.
The issue being, if he doesn't block with the Solitude, he does just die in the air.
Right, so if Mike has, say, like a shoot the sheriff, some sort of the 2-mana removal, and specifically not a push.
Oof. However, he does hit the Solitude there and picks
Wow,
it up.
big news. Because Sudeep has made it very clear, right, of only hitting these 3 lands. The rest of the hand is spells on spells on spells. So the hope is that for Sudeep, one of them is white. We know that it is. And Mike is hoping that none of them are white cards, that
Oh.
something's gone horribly wrong.
And Mike keeps drawing these lands. This is the 6th land, and Mike was
Yes.
at one point with 1 card in hand.
Yeah, the value of a Ketchmos and Frog allows you not only to have spells, but have your land drops, which means more spells. And here's Ophelia being pitched that Solitude number 2 we saw.
Is this a hard cast subtlety to protect?
Oh, it sure feels like it, 4 mana.
To protect.
Yeah, this is and I think that Solitude was for on the Angel, so this Solitude is gonna be able to block. And like we said, I think netting Sudeep at exactly being 1 life, and we see it there.
Which is crazy.
Now I also want to point out Mike Ryan played a Gloom Lake Verge. I think the Verges are like hugely impactful for Modern. We just need to wait for them to trickle down from how impactful they are in Standard right now,
Yeah,
especially in a 2-color deck.
we see a lot of this where things are played in Standard and people were really doubtful on cards until they play them themselves, and then they find out how busted they are, and they put them in their old favorite decks, and then things become staples overnight. And
Yes.
so I agree. I think that having check lands, because they're basically check lands that
Yes.
don't enter tapped
Ever.
is just like the best thing you could possibly ask for in a modern land.
Like I feel like your first, maybe second copy is still going to feel very free in your Modern deck.
Agreed.
Especially because we live in a fetch shock environment here. The land being fully turned on for your Verge feels like it's infinitely more possible than when you're trying to play it in like a standard deck.
Even if you just have to fetch for 1 surveil land, all the rest of your verges for the rest of the time will be turned on.
Yes, and people are already doing that. You're already going to fetch for basic, fetch for shock, fetch for surveil. That it's just nice to have a land that's always going to do the thing for you. Like you said, even on turn 1, it's not going to be tapped. So,
And no loss of life. Emperor of Bones.
okay, so an Emperor of Bones on, say, maybe a Solitude could be a route for Sudeep to start gaining some life, removing the subtlety. And I believe there should be one in the yard from last turn, right?
Yes.
Well, this card's a noble. Okay, shout out to the Emperor. Cool.
You know, when I see this card, I think of how low I was on this card when I first saw it. I was like, oh, adapt. Traditionally, when I see adapt, I think of it as a standard only mechanic. And I was really low on this card. But being able to hit a card every turn for free out of the graveyard and then just randomly taking a Grizzlebrand and putting it into play is just amazing.
Sudeep here went for that Solitude. Mike Ryan's last remaining card was the Counterspell. And we saw kind of from the turn 2 Counterspell out of Mike that maintaining, just having a little bit of Counterspells, a little bit of way to interact, force Sudeep to stumble over and over and over and over and over, and they're going to add up quickly over time, trying to find lands, trying to find spells, but Mike just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Sudeep did have some cool, sweet turns there, but Mike pushed it through in the end.
And having access to just being able to say no is always very powerful in these mid-range / control grind matchups.
Yes, we're going to look at this beautiful example here of the Orzhov deck. So this is going to be very similar to what we're seeing out of Sudeep, recently getting second place in a Moto Challenge. We're talking cards like Drannith Magistrate, White Orchid Phantoms, Aven Interrupter, Elishnorn, March of Otherworldly Light, Wrath of the Skies, Deafening Silence, and Stony Silence. Saw a lot of these cards out of Sudeep's sideboard as he was panning through, so we're probably going to see pretty close to what we see here.
I think probably the first things that I go to trim are I would trim these Fatal Pushes or the Thought Seizes, depending. You don't want to put cards in the graveyard. Fatal Pushes is an answer to Oculus, but you know that you're playing against a deck that has main yard graveyard hate. You might take out some of your Oculuses. The other thing is, if there's anything that is just trying to be aggressive, I would take that out. And in lieu of trying to slow my opponent down, Mike has the way he has Frog, he has Ketramos, he has Geist, he has all these things, and we cannot be aggressive when our opponent is playing a Geistisate draft and holding up Counterspell.
Right. One of the things that I may find interesting is I am drawn to, at minimum, bringing in this March of Otherworldly Light. I have found when you play against anything Delver adjacent, so these blue tempo decks that try to put just a creature in play and ride it for as long as they can, run out of creatures if you just keep going point and click on that removal, right? Yes. So you can understand Mike is probably playing 4 Frog, 4 Ketramos, 2 Subtlety, and 4 Oculus. Like you said, most likely probably going to shave some Oculuses, worried about the graveyard hate, which means the number of cards that Sudeep needs to deal with goes down. His Solitudes, alongside, keeping 1-2 pushes in, alongside the March, gives him tons of answers, as well as March being exile-based for if an Oculus or Ketramos does come into play. And then you may see Sudeep leaning on something maybe like an Aven Interrupter, just because he needs to try to fight back against Blue's interactivity.
I totally agree.
And then Esper Murktide, so you're looking at the blue-black base that we've become so accustomed to, but now splashing white to get access to Ketramos, also gaining access to things like Pest Control, Prismatic Ending, and some things out of the sideboard. So again, we see here from Mike, examples of cards that could be in Esper sideboard: Drannith, Consign, Spell Snare, Thoughtseize, Exercise, Pest Controls, and Stonies. So
there's so much that could be done here. I think the first thing that I always look at is like, what is bad in this matchup? I think Pest Control can come out. I think that probably you shave 1 or 2 Oculuses, and then there's a lot of 1-ofs that he's playing. There's a Spell Snare. I would go down to probably 2 or less Unearth. It cycles, so it's
yes,
okay.
Unearth is kind of in the same boat, right? If you're looking to shave 1 or 2 Oculuses due to fear of the graveyard, Unearth can kind of go with. You can imagine yourself kind of opening up 4 slots just like that, and you might be looking at things like, if we're looking specifically at this list, giving them Thoughtseizes, giving me Exercise if that's kind of the option, or even just having some numbers of Consign to Memory floating around. The black-white deck specifically, ETBs up the everything. Every card is most likely going to be an ETB deck. That can allow you to get low value on a Consign to Memory. You may not be able to get the creature itself, but you can technically tag. You can tag a Relic if that's something's happening. Or even Mike could play a little bit of a self-scam package and, I don't know, maybe consign a Subtlety trigger. There's a lot of little things. This card is incredible that if you're looking to just shave a few cards to not die to main deck Relic Progenitus, there's at least some good options.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, Mike and I keep talking about, like, how do you treat it when graveyard hate is brought in, but you have this core of this Oculus piece of your deck in Oculus Unearth, sometimes even more. It can be hard, right? A little bit of shaving, or do you take the whole thing? And that sometimes might be determined by just how good your sideboard is.
It's true. It's true. If you don't have the right options, you don't have the ability to trim the cards that are bad. But
right.
That's where deck building comes in.
Yes. One of the, I think, big Magic upgrades is not thinking of your deck as a main deck and a sideboard, but as a full 75 of understanding what you do and don't want in each matchup, but then having numbers work out so that when something does come out, you're ready for things to come in.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things is, you got 4 vials, take them out, bring 4 ley lines in. Make it work.
Yeah, and one of the parts I was going to mention is the way that these black-white decks out of Sudeep gained advantage before the new set was playing Aether Vial. But now the introduction of Ketramos has made them want to play the Relics in main deck instead. Some people are moving away from Vials anyways because there's this belief that the blue-black deck might not be very good right now, and that's the only time Vial was good. So Sudeep doesn't have Vial in the deck anymore. But now Mike is the matchup where Sudeep wishes he had Vial still.
And we're going to see how that plays out, whether or not first off, the white splash from Mike is worth it. And second, if Sudeep's not having vials is going to end up being the thing that determines the match.
That's how it felt in game one. Like, you imagine if I think any of the cards Sudeep drew there was actually having the Aether Vial, that would have helped with all of the mana woes. But instead, the hopes is that if you land Relic plus Ketramos and you're drawing a bunch of cards, that'll fix the mana woes too.
Yeah, absolutely. And here, early game, we're just getting surveillance, we're chilling, setting up our draws, making sure that, we're not going to lose to mana issues. A lot of these mid-range / control grind matches are just trying to make sure you can cast your threats. And Afalia comes down.
And very interesting here. Sudeep playing it on his main phase to play around counter magic from Mike untapping and having a second blue source here. So this is showing that Sudeep is willing to play around counterspell, but maybe be a little more possible to get some of the like main phase removal out of Mike, but making it that Mike either had to waste his turn of trying to like subtlety on Sudeep's end step, and instead playing it straight out at sorcery speeds, it can make your blue opponent play a little awkwardly.
And we talked about cutting the spell snare, and Mike here has a consign, but not a spell snare. Spell snare would have been able to tag the Thalia. Just putting. It's crazy how sometimes you make sideboarding decisions, and they can't always work out the way that you want them to.
Yeah, like the Orzhov deck is a big base of 1s and 3s and then more from there. So being caught by the 1/2, by that I mean the one spell that is a 2-drop, is going to be a little bit awkward here, but also Mike's going to know that when Mike starts to try playing threats out, that this consign might mean it's very difficult for Sudeep to try to solitude it and so forth. So we'll see how the give and take feels, but for right now, this Thalia isn't gaining value outside of being a flash 2-power attacker.
It's true. And you know what? Sometimes Grizzly Bears win games, but
yes,
that was the mentality back when I started playing in like 2014, 2015, and let's see how far things have come in 10 years.
Yeah.
Let's see if this 2/2 gets there.
I felt that way playing in standard RCQs over the weekend of like, well, I just have 3 power in play. I guess I'm just going to keep attacking until something changes in this game.
Screaming Nemesis is just a 3-mana 3/3, right?
Right, that's all.
Right?
We see Sudeep milling over Ephemerate, saying no thanks for that. Interesting, tells a little about the texture of the hand.
Decides?
Because the hand is 2 Ephemerate.
Oh,
Jeez.
wow.
And then none's lands last time, all lands this time.
It's really hard sometimes when you play Form Ephemerate. You need to have a creature with an ETB, otherwise it kind of does stone cold nothing.
Sudeep here with a hand of lands, Ketramos, and Ephemerate. Playing nuns, attacking with Thalia, passing turn.
I think this is to try to show Mike that he doesn't have a great hand, and Mike is smart. Mike is like, I don't believe you, you're bluffing. And he's like, oh, you're right, I'm kind of bluffing. He's gonna take this Ketramos, and he's gonna leave him with double Ephemerate and a land.
Yeah, because Sudeep did have the option of shock, play Ketramos, have Ephemerate available to protect either of my creatures.
And now going with the Fatal Push to just clear the board and completely swing the tempo back in Mike's direction. We know Sudeep's entire hand besides that face down card, and it's not going well.
Yeah, all blanks when you think about it. Just lands and Ephemerates, but no creatures.
Yeah, and now Mike's got the ability to either advance the board or just leave up a Solitude here, which is what I think. If I'm looking at 4 lands, I'm thinking that a 3/3 flyer is going to come down and basically time walk me.
We got to bring Collected Company back. Shout out to Viva. Yeah, we're all about. All right, I'm getting ready to play a Pioneer Energy. I'm looking at Coco again.
Oof.
Here's this Naked Witch Enchanter. Didn't have any targets anyways, getting counterspelled just cause, and Mike cycling an Unearth as well. Shows of strength, I think, just kind of throwing spells out there.
Mike just doesn't need it. He might have an Oculus in his hand, and he's just trying to fill the graveyard. He's at 5 right now. If he has a fetch land, nope.
Oh,
but, but with a land, he can discard a card. No, decides to leave up.
Oh, Sudeep. Okay. So, Drew Black Overlord of the Balemerc, has 6 mana, so fully incentivized to hardcast this, and if it resolves, Sudeep's got Ephemerates to go with it.
Ooh.
And I said if.
Oh. Yeah, and if you're Mike, you just feel so good about that. You're like, okay, that was why we left. We didn't tap out. We didn't try to get cheeky.
Yeah.
We were prepared, and
Sudeep can't play around, right? Sudeep just has to jam. That's just how this is going to work.
That's his ringleader.
Sorry, that was an Oculus pitch to the frog.
Whoa.
Because immediate unearthing it, jeez. Forget about your main deck graveyard. Hey, we're good to go.
And this is where I love Leyline of the Void, and I really wish more people played it, because if Sudeep had a Leyline in play, Mike would kind of have to try to play this mini game of how do I get this out of play. And as is with a Relic, or, in this situation, not having Graveyard Hate, But a Ketramos
It's a
might be here to
Ketramos.
swing the tides
Right.
back.
This thing is here right now just to be an enchantment.
Oh, it doesn't have enough cards in the
It doesn't have enough cards. I
He's gonna put a card
gosh,
in exile. He's gonna put a card in exile.
the
No,
Ketramos sees itself. It does. So that allows Sudeep to get one card deeper. It's the bones.
and then it's a new object, so he can do it again.
Sure could. And instead seems like being able to cash in the
Oc-
mana here for an Emperor of Bones.
No Oculus in the yard, tears, but he can
Yeah,
steal.
Overlord in the yard.
Ooh.
And then Ketramos saw another card get exiled. Okay, Bones, I see you. Oh no, guys, this cat god's son here, he's pretty good.
This might be the new modern hotness.
God, I don't know if you know this, but both these players are playing this Ketramos card.
The card's pretty expensive right now. I don't know what happened.
What we're seeing right here. I mean, we've both played against this deck in standard, and now we're seeing, as May likes to put it, a mirror, because they're both playing Ketramos. This is obviously a mirror. As a prismatic ending out of Mike here, fully taking care of that god. Whoops.
And just swinging for the fences, putting all the pressure on Sudeep, saying, I think I can kill you before you can kill me.
Yes. And remember, even though Ketramos did get exiled and it saw itself get ephemerated, Ketramos only triggers on your own turn. So Sudeep aware, not trying to get a trigger there while we're currently on Mike's turn. And 14 damage needs to be dealt, so Mike coming in for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 currently. 2 cards in hand, so Sudeep knows that it's not lethal incoming, but it sure is lot incoming.
And Sudeep looks like he's trying to figure out if there's anything in his deck
Oh, that's a question.
that he can top deck. He's trying to figure out.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sudeep, what you're talking about, I'm loving.
I agree.
Which is adapting this Emperor Bones in response to the Ephemerate, and then flickering that Overlord and keeping it forever.
And that's very much so what can happen. It's got a finality counter, but as soon as it leaves, it's a new object, I believe.
Oh, no, it has the finality counter.
Oh, it doesn't have to go to the end step? It just
Oh,
says,
wait.
It just says when it leaves, get
Okay,
exiled?
so I believe this allows you to get around the finality counter because finality counter just says it needs to go to exile, and that's where you're sending it anyways, which should allow Sudeep to flicker
Ooh.
it back.
That's a good point.
Oh, yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it. Yes,
Okay, looks like both
yes.
players are understanding what's happening.
And
Okay.
the Emperor's big.
And this could hit a Solitude.
Yeah. So
Mm.
now, one of the parts that's really important about Ephemerate that I don't think a lot of players know is Ephemerate has a trigger for rebound that goes on the stack, and then if that resolves, then you put Ephemerate the spell onto the stack. So that's why Sudeep is able to do these things right now. And then be able to cast the Ephemerate is because all of this is with the trigger waiting.
I see. Shout out to Twitch.
I was
chat.
right and wrong. Big shouts.
Finality counters only care about the cards going to graveyards. So that's a great point. Shout out to Twitch chat.
It still works, just not for what I said. But we're good. It works.
It's like I can imagine like being a mechanic back in the day when you're like, I swear I know how this works, and they fix it.
It works.
And it does. You don't care. You're
It's
like,
the old slap the side of the TV. I don't know what it fixed, but it did fix it.
yeah, no. And now we're in a position where Sudeep's trying to figure out, can he swing this game back in his favor?
Yeah, he's looking to use this Solitude, those Ephemerates that are kind of blanks, but these are allowing him to start taking care of all of Mike's threats. Life total going up, but Sudeep is in survival mode right now.
Yeah, Sudeep is the goblin in this scenario. He's fighting uphill. He's got the Overlord. That's the ringleader, and he's just going to try to use that Overlord to fight his way back in the game.
Yes. He's on the hunt for any creature that removes anything Mike's up to.
It's true. I think probably the best flip here would be another Solitude, followed by... You really could do either an Emperor of Bones or a Thalia. Thalia flickering your Bailmerk every turn would be great.
Whoop,
Oh, no,
whoop,
I take it back.
whoop,
Both of those
whoop.
cards are amazing. The Goblin or Ketramos.
Yeah, one of these is the $60 god.
Yeah, I would have gone for the Goblin, but I'm a little biased.
I do actually think Exile the Graveyard is very non-zero right now, but also this is Ketramos.
And you know what? When you have one card in hand, being able to just reliably put cards in your hand, drawing cards is, I don't think it's the best thing. People tell me drawing cards is pretty good.
Yeah. Game actions, and you take more of those when you draw cards.
I just like making tokens and turning them sideways.
Yeah, but then you have an Enduring Curiosity in play, and then they draw a bunch of cards, and then
Oh,
your thing do
no.
more things.
Oh
Then you
no.
can take more actions.
We played Is That Goblins for a
Wait,
while.
Hold up. Okay, everyone pause. Wait. Oh, here's the action. Oh, point
Okay.
at this is the Overlord that was Emperor Bones, so that's why we're doing the hand waving back and forth on what's going on with this Overlord.
So that's gone.
Down to 4 because the card gets exiled.
Draws.
Draw for Ketramos, send it back.
My brain told me that was a ley line, but it's not a ley line, so it has to be a Solitude.
Those are the two options I see. Remember, Mike can jump this frog, and we'll have 2 cards in hand. And last card is Relic, yep, but there's the one other drawn from this Ketramos that needs to be Fatal Push or Ephemerate.
And when your opponent is gearing up to win the game, you kind of just have to hope at this point. You have to be like, okay,
Yes, of course.
Sadeep, you got this.
Maybe Sudeep plays a little scared.
Well,
Maybe Mike plays a little scared.
I think that sometimes you have to act like you have it,
Well,
even if you don't have it.
Okay, that's a quick 3 cards exile.
Okay.
Frog in the air.
Mike senses the blood in the water.
Here he comes. Do you want to do anything? No? Okay. Discard. And that's
the
the
handshake.
game. Big shouts to Mike Ryan, taking it down 2-0 here with the Esper Oculus deck, taking advantage of the white splash that's been showing up in these Dimir decks, and now adding the brand new God and supercharging a deck that was falling out of favor, but boy oh boy is it back. Big congrats to Mike Ryan, again, taking this down 2-0.
Shout out to both these players. Both these players are really awesome pilots, and they're great fun to play against. So congrats to both of them.
And I see the backup players are sitting there, but they're long past playing games of Magic. I'll say Twin did Twin things, but there's only one way to find out. And if you want to buy a Ketramos for yourself, or maybe History of Banali, Wizard's Retort, Snapcaster Mage, any of the goods, right? Know that there are cards on cards available at nerdragegaming.com. You want to pick up cards from the brand new Aether Drift set? Please do so. Stop on by, get them goods. I always want to point out the Nerd Rage Gaming wish list function. If there are cards that you are after, these are going to give you opportunities to either purchase them when they come in or be notified when they do, so you can purchase them right away. Very, very helpful when you're trying to get new cards from new sets. You get to know right away when nerdragegaming.com has those beautiful cards available.
Yeah, big shout out to NRG.
As well, if you are looking to connect with other players, there are 2 spots to do so for Nerd Rage Gaming on Discord. You can go to the Championship Series, so that's for the NRG series. You can stop by that Discord to talk to the other competitive-minded players who will be at the big events, but there's also one for the Nerd Rage Gaming home store. That's where this event is happening right now, happening all the time, week to week to week, as well as local play here for Standard and Legacy. Stop by that Discord, chat with the players, figure out the who's who's, learn all the goods from the Nerd Rage Gaming home store players themselves. With all that being said, folks, we're going to take a quick little break, and we will see all of you for round number 2. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Bye. everybody, and welcome back to Wednesday Night Magic here at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store in beautiful Buffalo Grove, Illinois. I'm Dom Stryker alongside Jack.
We're just chilling. It's just another day.
And as Jack said, we're just chilling. It's another day. We got Battle of the Judges, all right? These are two of our local judges. They're always helping out for all of the events, but they're out here jamming games as well. If you're at a MagicCon, you might see Kai on the left side working that beautiful con. But right now, we're seeing these players rocking. Is it V? Is it? Run it down.
I, for some reason, have the feeling in my gut that Phoenix is going to have more interaction than Twin. I think that Twin's probably going to be more of a counter-based or like control-based deck, whereas Brian's going to be a deck that's trying to play interaction, play a lot of cantrips, and then just get threats in play. And I think that Brian might have the edge because his deck's a little bit faster. Kai does have access to an infinite combo, but Brian being able to put a bunch of dudes in the air might just get there faster.
Yeah, this is going to be the age-old question of speed versus like interaction. Sometimes I typically say that the deck that is one step bigger is most likely to win a game, right? So if Kai is kind of one bigger on his deck overall, doesn't mean he's favored here, but Tepper's going to be a lot faster, and that's going to be the give and take that we're going to see play out in this match.
I did see one card in Brian's hand that I want to point out, Demi-Lich. Demi-Lich is a card in this new Is It Phoenix deck that is really cool, and I think about it like Hollow One. It's just their Hollow One. When you're able to cast it for free, it just feels like a Hollow One, honestly.
Yes. So Demi-Lich is going to cost a blue pip less for each instant sorcery you played for a turn. And then when it attacks, you can cast a spell from the yard.
Yep, that's perfect.
Hey. So here we have that Demi-Lich again. It costs one blue less for instant sorcery you cast this turn.
Oh, yeah.
When it attacks, you must exile a thing and you make a copy. And obvi, you can cast from your graveyard, but you must also exile those 4 instants and sorceries.
So that's another part of the card I totally forgot about is if you bin it with a Consider,
Of course.
if you Faithless Looting it into the yard,
Yep.
you can just play it from your graveyard as if it was in your hand, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I understand this deck is called Is It Phoenix. One of the few people still championing. Oh my goodness. Few people championing Is It Phoenix was our tried and true modern lover of Aspiring Spike, and he will say that he thinks the Demi-Lich is even better than Phoenix itself.
Watching it do things, I agree. When you're able to just go, well, here's a bolt, and then I'm going to attack, and then here's another bolt, and you just kill your opponent with one creature, it's like your one card is 3 Phoenixes.
Right, and when you can see the power of just how much it can really just be a big giant threat, recursive from the graveyard, a lot of it is going to feel just like the Phoenixes themselves.
And it looks like they're just exchanging resources, filling up the graveyard. Kai's making sure he's leaving up interaction every turn. Brian's just doing the graveyard thing, throwing cards in the yard, trying to dig to some Phoenixes and just replace some of the cards he has in his hand. It does look like he has 3 lands, though. So Brian trying to find a way get these lands out of his hand. It looks like he drew another land for his turn.
Yeah, I think on the Molda 6, Brian kept a pretty land-heavy hand, understanding that he'll be able to get rid of some of them. But the hard part is if you draw even more, it gets harder quickly.
And if Brian draws Phoenix here, he doesn't want to discard Phoenix. He'd rather discard 2 lands. So it puts him in a really tough spot.
And the way those lands went, I'm seeing even more lands and Manamorphose in hand for Brian.
Is there a world where you go play Manamorphose, that's 2 instants cast, make 2 blue, cast Demi-Lich?
Is there a Demi-Lich in hand? That's the big question, right? And there's the Manamorphose.
I think that this might he's just passing. So it got Spell Pierced. Spell Pierced so good in these blue-red mirrors, being able to hold up 1 mana. It's not Force Spike, but being able to basically counter anything that your opponent plays because of how tempo-based both these decks are. They'll be almost tapping out every single turn. Most of them have, Brian we know has a bunch of lands, but most of them will only be playing on 2 or 3 lands for most of the game.
And the part that you have to remember is if you are Brian, you're shaking your boots a little because if Kai has it, Kai could go flash on 3, untap, land 4, twin ya, and Brian's going to have to worry about it for every turn for the rest of this game.
And the beautiful thing about playing a deck like Splinter Twin is you can kind of just bluff.
Because he's holding up everything else.
Yeah. And it looks like he does not have Twin, but what he does have is Force Negation, Snapcaster Mage, Twin, and
importantly, this is a flare.
Flare.
Not the Force.
Okay.
So if Kai wants, he can kind of cash in this 3-mana counter spell or actual factual counterspell.
Yeah. And then being able to play the Snapcaster Mage and not have the Flare in the graveyard, just sack the Snapcaster Mage, cast something else, cast the Flare for free,
Mm-hmm.
sacking the Mage might be something that we see.
Yeah, Kai might be working towards fourth land and really turning on this Snapcaster Mage, but Tepper with a Tameo.
And if we see Tepper just have two cards in hand and they're both lands, and we might see end step Kai flashing in a Snapcaster Mage, going to his turn, and putting possibly a Splinter Twin on a Snapcaster
Oh
Mage.
yeah. Oh yeah.
I know
That's
I know I'm crazy, but if
oh,
Brian has two lands here,
how about Snap Pierce?
I like Snap Pierce even more for some reason.
Because Tepper was trying to flash back a Faithless Looting there. A
Mm,
real sign of desperation. Kai pretty easily sniffed that out, taking care of this. Now Flame of Ignoring down the Tameo, but has that Wizard, so drawing cards as well.
not even really needing to, waste a card like Splinter Twin. Hold it till you find that Deceiver Exarch. Just make sure that you have that AB combo win the game.
Yeah, and Kai has now found the fourth land drop, so it's even more menacing.
Yeah, and
Manamorphose.
Manamorphose is cool because it makes your Demilich one spell cheaper. It gives you an extra card. It gives you a
Yeah.
mana back. It literally does everything.
It's one of the cards that really scares me. We're talking Street Wraith. We're talking Manamorphose. I'm talking Mishra's Bauble. These are cards that are so close to if something goes really wrong to things breaking very quickly.
Yeah, I remember originally, before Faithless Looting was banned, one of the scariest draws that I would see out of Phoenix would be Manamorphose, Faithless Looting, pitch to Phoenix,
Oh yeah.
go to combat. On turn 2 is swing for 6, and then they still have cards in their hand.
I know Brian's even playing a main deck Surgical because you just cast it for free as one of your spells. Like
Oh
there
yeah.
are a lot of ways, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah,
And
that
Tepper's digging.
yeah, being able to just keep continuously drawing cards, trying to find not lands, but it looks like unfortunately that was his last card.
But it is considered, so Tepper gets to debate if he does or doesn't want it. And this is not the face of someone who's milling a Phoenix, but instead really debating on what that card is.
And for the positives, that's also not a land. He would just spin it. So that must be a card that he thinks gives him some agency.
I think the card I would think the most on is Faithless Looting.
That makes sense.
Bingo!
Bingo. You got it.
Because milling it over, you have access to flashing it back. Drawing it means Tepper's going to net 0 cards in hand, but if any of these cards milled over are Phoenixes or Demiliches, things go poorly. And Kai understands that and is cashing in that flare.
Not having a snap in play, the board is at parity, but Tepper,
There's a Lich. There it is.
and this is the power of this card we were talking about, right? Brian doesn't have cards in hand; he just has cards in the graveyard. But this Lich will keep coming back. It doesn't look like Kai has a way to exile it, and so it looks like this Lich might be able to take over this game unless Kai's able to find a Deceiver Exarch.
Kai has a very nostalgic hand of Snapcaster Twin Twin.
Oh, the power!
So if you're a Steam Vents gamer, this is for you, everyone. All right, this match is beautiful. It's for you.
And
Please enjoy.
And the top deck Tameo, making Brian think. Brian's fetching. This looks like Kai probably just passed.
Yeah.
Brian has no cards in hand. The only reason he'd fetch is just to end a step, get a tap land, then he goes to his turn. So this might just be Kai holding up the snap. Yeah, we know he has a snap.
Mm-hmm.
So he might just be holding up the flare and knowing that he can just trade in this 2/1 to counter the best spell that Brian can find.
Starting the turn off, Brian has here the Faithless Salvaging that was coming off rebound there for him. An MH2 card that folks thought was going to bring back Phoenix, but didn't quite do it, but is still kind of an integral part of the system now. Discard a card, draw a card, but it had that rebound. So you saw Tepper begin the turn with that loot and then drop return. And there goes the Demilich. Kai cracking that clue, drawing a card, getting all the resources before taking the big chunk of damage here from the Demilich. All right, Tepper.
Now Brian must have had two cards or a card in his hand last turn because then he had. That's the only way that he has two cards in his hand right now, right?
Yeah, and now we see, I think, choosing which card to exile to the Demilich.
He might be trying to keep certain cards in his hand to fight this counter war over an important turn to make sure that he can get something resolved that could turn the tide of the game. Because we're seeing Brian's at 10.
Yes, right. Good point, right? And we see flashing back the Manamorphose, basically a free draw card, finding a Bolt to take down this Tameo, and the card added to Kai's hand is another Snapcaster Mage.
Snap is a good card, but you really want to hit that 5th land so that you can snap, get your Flame of Anor back,
Yeah,
draw
yeah.
2 cards, kill the Demilich.
And then just kind of hope that Tepper can't rebuild because he's on such low resources.
And this Demilich, if he kills it, just comes back.
the recursive threats of this is a deck, and game 1 is the time to do it because, post board, who knows what Kai could throw at him to interact with that graveyard, but this is the game that Tepper should be going crazy.
Definitely. If I'm Tepper, I think that game 1, I'm scared of only probably 2 cards, right? I'm scared of a counterspell and I'm scared of a Splinter Twin, right?
Hey, that's a good list of 2 cards you're afraid of.
And then after sideboards, you have everything under the sun that's graveyard hate. You're just scared of Lay Out of the Void, Surgical Extraction, you name it. He's scared.
Man, if Tepper sniffs this out,
Main deck Surgical,
and
he
Kai,
just
scoop it up
concedes.
because I think Tepper might have named Snap, and Kai's hand was just 2 snaps. Oh,
With the Omega Brain Read by Brian.
beautiful. Do we have actual factual deck lists for these gamers? Shout out. We have both of their deck lists. Can you believe it? Brian Tepper here. Blue, red, Phoenix. Let's take a peek at this sideboard. Magus of the Moon, Consigned to Memory, Spell Pierce, Pyroclasm, Wrath of the Skies, Blood Moon.
This is an amazing sideboard. I think that the inclusion of white in this deck is really like respect to Breach, it's respect to Urza Saga, all the super fast combo decks right now. You need to just clear the board. You don't care if they're creatures, you don't care if they're artifacts, you don't care if they're enchantments. You gotta kill it all.
Yes. Now the hard part is, what if I don't want to bring in a lot of these cards against my twin opponent?
Yeah, I'm looking at 3 Wrath, 3 Pyroclasm as cards that you just can't play. Blood Moon does literally nothing. I don't want to say literally nothing.
In a
but
blue-red deck, be blue-red.
Yeah, it hurts you more.
Yes, right.
Spell Pierce, Consign. I don't know. You could stifle.
I think Pierce and Consign are the cards that we're looking at, and it might be more Tepper not needing to bring those in, but if he feels there's anything he needs to take out.
Yeah, that's true. I think that if we look at the main deck, we probably don't see too much. It's probably a trim, right? You probably trim a Faithless Salvaging. You love the Surgicals. Maybe you trim a couple like Thought Scours, cards that just dump cards in the bin. Demilich, just card that relies in the bin. Maybe you go 1-1-1-1 from random slots, and then you just go on.
Yeah, I think Tepper, at minimum, just kind of wants these Pierces and will try his best. And then Kai, with the Izzy Wizzies, as he called it, Twizzle or something, is it Wizard Twin? So we're looking at Harbinger of the Seas, Magus of the Moon, a little column A, a little column B, or like a Consigned Memory, Meltdown, Spell Snare, Pyroclasm, Force and Negation, some Invert Polarity, sorry, not Is It Polarity, Engineer Explosives, Relic Progenitus, Soul Guide. Those 2 at the bottom.
I was going to say those 2 at the bottom, and then I'm also kind of like intrigued about this Harbinger of the Sea. If you're able to turn off red on your opponent's deck, they probably can just cantrip and still cast their Demiliches, but you might be able to sneak a game if they might not have a basic mountain thinking that they don't need one, right?
Yeah, can I interest you in Consigned to Memory counter your Phoenix return trigger? Consigned to Memory is just cracked. That's like, well, you could bring it in just about any matchup and you'll find the space. But the real question is, Kai's looking at this, probably wants a Force of Negation, counterspell that's got that exile attached to it. Could be tempted to bring Clasm because it does deal with the Phoenixes, so it's a way to deal with the Phoenixes and then get them out of the graveyard with things like the Soul Guide and the Relic. So I would not be shocked if you see some Pyros. Definitely going to see these graveyard hate artifacts, and you might just see maybe a Harbinger, maybe some Consigns, but know that there's those weapons that Kai could have access to.
I like all that. Now, what would you usually cut? I think I would probably trim or just cut some of the Tameos. Say the Tameos and like I don't want to say snaps, but we're trying to take on more of a controlling game. Again, we know Brian's the aggressor. Do you cut some of your more aggressive value cards, like maybe 2 Trap Trainer, 2 Tameo?
Oh, I can't believe you would take Thunder Trap Trainers out.
Otters,
Okay.
Otters are not goblins.
This card's cracked. And your card advantage, such as Trainer, that dig really deep, make your sideboard cards better because you find them more often. This is one of the parts that I really like about yeah, there's only one relic, one soul guide, but Thunder Trap means Kai digs really far to try to find them.
That's true. And
Um,
hard pivot from me then. What if?
I think it's Harbinger and V-Click get to hit the
Yeah,
showers and the two artifacts come in,
that makes sense.
and Kai might just call it a day from there.
I like that. I was gonna say the other thing is you could cut the combo, but I think that you're right. I think you
I
want to keep the
whoa.
main game plan.
Oh, Kai is already playing, I think, the correct number of Splinter Twin, which is 3.
Yeah,
That it's all or nothing at that point, right?
that
Of
that makes
if you're
sense.
doing a little bit of trimming, I typically post-board trim down to 3. So if we're already starting there, be careful.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I agree with that totally. And I think that, overboarding is like really
It's so hard.
one of the things that makes a Magic player is knowing when to not board too much.
Right, like I'm mentioning, hey, consigned to memory can be pretty good in a lot of matchups. Is it better than what you're taking out? That's a part of that actual conversation, that agreement. But sometimes cards just always have text, and the hardest part is when they have the most text or when it's actually applicable.
Yeah. And it's hard to see those scenarios until you're in the moment and you're trying to figure out, okay, like what do I need in this situation? And then sometimes the card that you cut is the card that you need. So that's why, it's important to get those reps. It's important to come play at your local LGS. So, if you ever want to play Modern on Wednesday, come on by. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, I actually think locals are one of the best ways to get reps. The stakes are usually pretty low. Usually you're playing against homies. The vibe's pretty good. And they're very understandable if you're like, I will literally tell opponents when I sit down, like, hey, I've never played this before, so if like I get really lost in it, I'm really sorry. Like I'm trying out this new thing,
Yeah.
and folks are typically like, yeah, no problem.
That's
Whereas if you're at round 1 of an energy series event, they don't care if you're new to the deck, right? It's go time.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about playing at locals is you play with people who are usually better than you, or at least know your deck better than you, and then also you just get such a wide variety of people that you meet. We iron sharpens iron, but diversity makes us all a little bit stronger. When we take things from each other and we put it in our playbook, we watch how other people play. We're an amalgam of who we're around, and so you know
Beautiful.
I'm a goblin. I'm not a poet.
And it's that idea too of like, if you're switching from I'm playing sword to I'm playing axe, iron still sharpens iron, right? Like you're going to get that back and forth of playing against local players. That I also think one of the best ways to learn how your deck works is just to actually play games. I think a big part of playing paper magic and playing local paper magic is also the dexterity of your own deck, right? Sometimes it can be frustrating, like, oh, I played against A, I'm never going to see that in energy, or I played against B, I've never seen this deck before. But also understand that a part of that experience is learning how your deck works, even just how to physically move the cardboard around, right? I'm a big game actions and combo player, and to physically feel and make the game actions really helps with understanding, so that when you do get in those high pressure situations, big events, you know what you're physically doing on top of what you're mentally doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this game, it already started off really high stakes. So Kai had one of the two artifact cards that he brought in. There's a Splinter Twin in the graveyard, and then Brian's just been kind of filling the graveyard with Manamorphose and Thought Scour. Now Brian has a Surgical in his hand, so both of these players have some agency here.
There's a
And
twin.
there's a Splinter
Yes,
Twin
Brian.
in the graveyard.
Now Brian kept up mana, so he's also being like, "Do I have counter magic?
And
What do you think of that?"
and exactly, this might be a bluff by Brian to say I do have a counterspell, even though he does not.
This is incredible.
And Kai says if he has a counterspell, I can't fight this war. I'll lose the game.
Oh, Kai just can't fight at all. He's bluffing.
Oh,
This is
you're
full
right.
bluff.
That's not a force negation. That's a flare.
He can eat it with his own relic, can he?
Oh, wait, wait, wait.
Tepper, did you target this Tarn? Tapper.
Wow.
Tapper.
Wow.
He knew about the relic. He
Yeah.
was
So he
he's
knew he could
forcing
do
some
it.
action.
He forced a card out of the graveyard, and he made Kai kind of cry.
So I imagine Brian's gonna
Inside.
try a triple spell here.
He has to. He has to try to use it defensively. So now he can go.
Wow.
Okay, on offense, this relic doesn't do anything.
Dude, surgical extraction is really cool when someone uses it for buck wild reasons.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to there's some games where you surgical before you cast your Snoop. just to get them to stop your
And there's
surgical.
no priority window, so Brian discards the Demi-Lich and then can
Oh.
immediately bring it back before Kai ever has priority. Judge v. Judge, take that.
And this is why you need to play your deck and learn the rules, because when you're in this position, you want to know what priority is and when you
Right.
have it and when you don't.
You saw the speed and fluidity in which Brian did these. He understood how it was going to play out and was just waiting for Kai to catch up.
Yep. And that's the beauty of playing combo slash aggro and first off, knowing your deck. Modern's a format that rewards players who invest in a deck. And I think that, knowing what you're doing is one of the best things that you can do. Don't worry about investing in the best cards. Those will get banned. Don't worry about trying to metagame. Just learn your cards and how to play them. And that'll trickle into everything else that you do. I would say that all the best players that I know goldfish every waking second that they have because they want to know stuff that they don't know, right? When I watch some of the best players that I know play, they're usually not outside after rounds. They're usually at the table goldfishing. And I'll say when I'm at home, right, late at night when I'm done streaming, I, I get off the computer, I get done playing online Magic, I pick up my modern deck and I just goldfish Kiki Jiki
Of
combo by
course.
myself
Yeah.
at 3 in the morning
Uh,
because I need to remember how it works.
yes.
And sometimes I learn things like I put myself in scenarios. What happens if my opponent is double bolt? How do you play around that? By putting yourself in these hypothetical situations when they realistically happen, then you're prepared. Sorry for rambling. Back to
No,
the games.
it's all real. And now all of that was just in the time for Kai to resolve a Thunder Trap, pass it back. Tepper's now got this beautiful Tamio. And the Demi-Lich is just big, right? I'm pretty sure Kai picked up Bolt off that Thunder Trap and says, like, well, that card's pretty big, huh?
And Kai again trying to figure out, what angle should he attack this game? Is he first off, he's missing land drops, so he's a little bit behind there. Also, not having access to something like the Demi-Lich or Arclight Phoenix that's just coming back. If that Splinter Twin was a Demi-Lich and his deck was geared a little bit differently,
Sure.
he could just grind next to Brian. But as is, he has to try to hope that his interaction lines up well enough so he's in a position to just take over the game with the Splinter Twin. And so far, Brian hasn't given him enough space to do that.
Now, Kai does have a few bolts in hand and snaps in deck. If Brian gets a little too frisky, Kai might just oopsie whoopsie, bolt, 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 and end this game. So be careful out there, Tepper.
Yeah, this Thunder Trap trainer might get in for the 2 points of damage to put him at 12, which is, that's 4 bolts.
Yeah, this Tamio here is going to shut off the Thunder Trap, but this bolt will too. Just Brian not messing around, casting spells.
Yeah, respect. Brian showing respect here to that Thunder Trap, knowing that it represents a flare in Kai's hand.
Two liches.
And this is when this card feels like Hollow One, right? When you cast 4 spells and you can cast 2, 3, hell, even 4
And that's the
Demi-Liches.
game, folks. Woo-wee! Hey, big shouts, big Demi-Liches, and a lot of that, truly in that moment, came from Brian's understanding that he knew that if on his 4th spell he put the Demi-Lich into the yard, there would not be a priority window for Kai to interact, that the next thing that happens is Tepper would put a Demi-Lich on the stack, resolved it, and rode that thing.
Yeah, great gameplay. Both of these players, amazing pilots. It's just, it comes down to who's the aggressor, and Brian was able to accelerate with enough forward pressure to maintain momentum and tempo. Who would have thought?
Yeah, big congrats on the Izich Judge battle. And now we're in the back match. And you might be wondering what's going on here. It's lives. This is Grinding Breach versus Grinding Breach.
Oh, there's a world where both of these players are playing different decks, where Clark is playing Boros and Andre is playing Eldrazi.
Yes, this is
However-
the world we knew last we were here.
We're in the Magic Cinematic Universe, and it looks like Clark's hand is
Brother,
geared.
wait a second.
Is
Hey,
geared.
okay, so, folks, Clark's hand, Breach, Grinding Station, Soul Guide Lantern, a.k.a. an artifact to sacrifice to mill away with the Grinding Station. So Clark is on pure survival mode with this Tamio in play because it will not take long for it all to pay off.
And he needs a land.
He needs a land.
He needs a land more than anything in
This
the world.
is a multi-6 out of Clark? Yeah, multi-6. With Tamio, land, and the kill. But the hard part is find more lands.
and I think Clark just pump faked a removal spell. He held a card out, and then he put it back in his hand. And I think he was trying to figure out whether or not he loses, and he did not draw land. That was a face of a man who did not find his land drop. Poor Clark. That's tough. When the
Yeah.
when the magic gods don't give you what you need, it's like, come on, I'm playing this game. I paid for these cardboard cards.
And Andres played a needle here in the mirror. And
Oof.
important is whatever Andres named is going to affect both of them.
I mean, it has to be. It has to be. I would say it's grinding station because grinding station is something that Andre's ahead on board. He doesn't need to fear about the mid-range grinding game plan.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing he has to be scared of is his backdoor combo. So I would say if I was in Andre's spot, Needle's definitely on breach.
Oh,
Or,
I
or
think so.
station.
I agree, especially because the deck can be in a situation where he can answer his own needle before starting to go for it.
Yes.
But like you're saying, it creates a situation where he stays safe. Clark here flipping over Sink into Stupor. That's land number 2. Very important here.
Andre could also be in a spot where he plays out the combo, and then he waits for Clark to interact with the needle to try to combo for himself, and then he just goes off.
Yeah. So Clark, incentivized here to play out this station. Send the turn on back. Now, this is because Clark does not have any other castables, but Andres doesn't need to know that.
Now, if Clark gets to untap, he still needs to draw a 0-mana artifact in order to go off. Am I right?
Yes, he has kind of at least one shot at milling 3 cards. He can get rid of a clue or so forth here. But Andres now looks like also recurring a Soul Guide Lantern thanks to his Emery. He milled it over last turn. So now both these players staring at each other, both with Soul Guide Lanterns, which means the other cannot go off unless they can go off after losing their whole graveyard and starting all over again.
This might end up being just a Tameo flip battle. Who can alter Tameo first?
Yeah, and Andres ahead on mana due to naturally getting this shifting woodland, but also having this Mox Amber has allowed Andres kind of be 2 mana ahead. Clark also finding a tap shifting woodlands, just blow for blow, card for card between these two, and I have to imagine pretty close to a full on mirror.
The only thing that I can imagine Clark drawing to make this more of a mirror is that needle.
Yeah, and then name the same thing. I would love to know what's on the needle.
Legend.
And again, these are very important moments. The two players deep in battle. I saw Clark. That's that grinding station. It's that grinding station. Smart move from Andres, right? Just making sure that he does not lose. He'll figure out later if he tries to win.
Exactly. At this point, just build a board big enough so that when you find at least one Urza Saga, you can kind of just transform this game in your favor. Pretty much, you can't reverse that. Once you get an Urza Saga and you start making constructs on this point, get a get a Shadow Spear, give one of the constructs lifelink and or trample, if the lists play that, and then just punch through for a bunch.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. People used to love to use Shadow Spear to break through board stalls like this, and then the deck gets like really good, and they're like, nah, we just won't even need the slot. It's like, well, maybe you do, because sometimes we end up in games just like this one.
And having a bunch of artifacts is good, but like you need a payoff, right?
Oh, Clark's about to
Clark is
go
happy.
deep.
That's a maniacal face of a man about to do things.
Because he has access to Malevolent Rumble now,
Ooh.
and he drew a Mox Amber, which gives him, or a Mox Opal, sorry, which gives him access to a second green source that he can just keep rumbling if he wants and get real deep into his deck and find the goods.
Big shout out to Malevolent Rumble, another card that I really did not evaluate well.
Cracked card. Okay.
Oh my god, it's insane. So we have a red and 6,
Yes.
a Mishra's Bauble, an island, and a Spell Pierce. Talk to me.
So this Ren 6 is one of the grind pieces for playing through these mirrors because it can allow you to loop Passages and loop your own Urza Sagas. So Clark is not yet in a situation where he has either of those going, but he is in a situation where he kind of needs to take the value card. The other ones being a land and a bauble, those are okay, but the Ren might be the highest upside available to Clark.
And you know what? You don't have a fetch land right now, and your opponent does have a Soul Guide Lantern. However, if you have multiple fetch lands, you're going to get to a point where this Ren just wins you the game by itself.
And he's milling over this island, so the first Ren trigger is taken care of. So he knows that he can use the Mox in his hand to gain access to green, to cast the Ren, to pick up the island, to make his land drop.
And this is just a beautiful sequence by Clark with the Malevolent Rumble, literally giving you everything that you need in order to create a board state that now rivals Andres.
Yes. And much like Phoenix, the Grinding Breach deck is defined by strong sequencing, right? Of making sure that you're doing everything in the right order. Things are so cheap and easy to do that you need to be purposeful in making sure that you're doing things in the correct order, because you could have all the pieces, but it could all fall apart just depending on how you play it out.
Yeah, sequencing is so important. Going back to what we were saying earlier, you have to know what order to play your cards in so you don't just lose to yourself.
Yes, yeah, don't recommend losing to yourself. That's one of the hardest feelings. And in comes that yo. Getting up to that third clue, Clark just kind of amassing a board state. What I think is going to be the hardest part is Andres kind of has the Emery plus Mishra's Bobble that can slowly get Andres more cards. But Clark may be starting to pull ahead with kind of the one value piece in play in the form of this run in six versus Andres having his one value piece in the form of this Emery.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see if it's Planeswalker or Creature. Which one gives them more value? We'll find out today.
Yeah, and it both of them defined by card and graveyard, right, of that interaction back and forth. We know that Clark has a Rumble to try to refuel to really, really make this run tick, but Andres is drawing additional cards each turn. So kind of blow for blow. And we know if things go just a little right for Clark, he's got full combo ready to go. But Andres really keeping that hand close to the vest.
Do they play Beseiju in these lists
Oh yeah.
now?
Oh yeah.
So I think that would probably be the best draw for Clark.
Big agree. Agree on many a front that it's a good place to start, but then there's also the Soul Guide Lantern. So Clark kind of has two things he has to work through,
True.
and it's hard with Emery in play because anything he blows up, Andres will get right back. And we see that just again looping this Mishra's Bobble with the Emery, taking his flipped Tameo, picking up this Swan Song card that can really throw this matchup off its kilter, as it's one of the main kind of counter spells that either of them have access to, and it being face up means Clark's really gonna have to play around it.
And if I'm not mistaken, it counters every card in Clark's hand.
Oh boy, right? Because it has
Artifact, enchantment. Is it
I think it's sorcery instant enchantment.
sorcery, instant enchantment? Yeah, so I believe that's everything. Oh, it's not artifact. But he doesn't have any artifacts in his hand, I don't believe.
Okay, you're so right, so right. Yeah, and I think Clark's just gonna start with this Rumble. The hard part is there's so many pieces on both sides for the other player to try to work through.
There might be a world where Shifting Woodland does some work late game, where they're able to like play a resource battle, but one of them Shifting Woodlands after the Soul Guide Lanterns have been played through. That was interesting.
Yeah, Clark with a Flame of Anor on top, which also perfect time that he looked now. He's no longer incentivized to flip his Tameo because she is his wizard. So to get both advantages out of the Flame of Anor, he's disincentivized to flip his Planeswalker.
He can crack the
Oh yeah, talk to me. Yes, yes.
yeah, he can. So what he can do is he can crack a clue to draw it, and then he can hit the Pithing Needle, and he could either draw two, or he could
I'm killing Emery.
kill an
Emery.
Emery.
Kill Emery.
And I like both of those.
Because it means the needle does not come back.
Exactly. And then you have Soul Guide Lantern to get rid of it forever.
Yeah, and then the hard part is Clark will just have one more piece to work through in the form of the opposing Soul Guide as well. But this Flame of Anor is really nice because it's going to tag kind of two of the three cards that Clark needs to work through. So Andres may not even know it, just how much on the back foot he is right now.
Yeah, and it looks like he's spending mana in his end step. And he's going to wait for him to completely tap out. Now that he's completely tapped out,
Yeah, before you draw that card.
I would, and look at Andre's eyes. Andre's realized,
Whoopsie.
I might have tapped out here in the mirror, and
Yep.
this might be very bad for me.
And this Swan Song's not even held up anymore.
Exactly. And I think
Wee.
I think that was the one thing that he couldn't do was tap out for that Swan Song.
Yeah, because Clark has Crack Clue. Oh, okay, fine. What could that possibly do? It's the Flame of Anor. Nah, that's not resolving yet. And then here's the Flame. Yeah, bing, bing. Kill the needle. Kill the Emery.
And the Soul Guide Lantern.
Yeah, I have no interest in that one. Don't worry about
Yeah.
popping that yet.
Now the Flame of Anor is resolved. Still in the end step.
Now Andres will draw for that clue.
Yeah. I don't know. I would have popped the Soul Guide Lantern. Am I crazy?
No, so if Andres pops the Soul Guide, he loses the game.
No. By Clark. I would have, before he untapped,
Mm.
I would have gotten rid of Andre's entire graveyard. His needle is gone, and he's lost the graveyard for the Emery.
Right. The
But-
thing is he has many a window before any of this will go wrong, right? That has the option to kind of choose these right spots. Andres also was holding the combo in hand.
So that's a very good point. That's a
And
reason not
now,
to have gotten rid of the graveyard in the upkeep and instead have waited patiently like he did.
now, I believe Andres was supposed to play this out in the opposite order
Yes.
because, one, when you play out the grinding station, it self triggers its own untap, which means you can sacrifice something and then allow it to untap, which kind of gives Andres just a little bit more of a window because that means if Clark cracks the Soul Guy and exiles the whole graveyard, Andres still has a grinding station untap that allow him to put exactly 3 cards in to start his cycle anew.
And sometimes 3 cards in the bin is all you need to be able to go off with this deck.
Yeah, Andres will need eventually 4 cards in yard because you need to let the Thoracle hang around and exile the other 3.
That's true.
But he has access to sack his Soul Guide, so there is access to that one additional card. And if at any point along the chain Andres plays out a Malevolent Rumble that nets 1 extra card, as it mills 3 has itself when you grab something, which nets 1 card in the yard. But currently Andres is on the razor thin needle of trying to work through this as Clark has popped that Soul Guide.
Clark allows Andre to float a mana with the Mox Opal and then sack it to mill, but after the sack cost is paid, before the mill resolves, he exiles his graveyard.
Yeah, but I believe we're in the dexterity moment.
And yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Clark understands that it's done here. It's just going to take a minute. Andre's taking it down after being unlocked from his own Pithy Needle. Clark helping out just a little there, but I think Clark incentivized to do so because he's about to go for it as well. Could have maybe held and blown up both those things in Andres' end step, but that feels light years from when the events did take place. That allowed Andres just that one window to try to push for it.
Yeah, real close games. Both these players playing the same deck. So ultimately, it comes down to who has more hate and how they draw. So
And if you want to play formats that aren't modern, boy, do I have an opportunity for you because you can head on down to Madison, Wisconsin for the next NRG Nerd Rage Gaming Championship Series event, March 15th and the 16th. If you've been enjoying Standard like everybody working here in the NRG booth, we're big Standard fans right now. You can come on down to the 10K Standard Showdown. Showdowns mean if you win, you get a token and you auto-qual for NRG Champs. And you get a banner now. Oh yeah. If you've been to the event, big beautiful banners outside the event. You can be just like Garrick, the 2024 MVP. That if you win on Saturday, you can head on down to the NRG Series at the end of the year championship event. And then Sunday, rise like a phoenix from the ashes. Somebody can play Pioneer. So March 15th and the 16th, again, that's that Madison, Wisconsin event. 10K Standard, 5K Pio. If you want to play additional games, the NRG Series in May will be back here in the Chicagoland area with a Modern Showdown and a Standard Trial. In June 28th and the 29th, Indianapolis, do not adjust your screens. 10K Standard and 10K Magic the Gathering presents Final Fantasy Team Sealed Showdown event. We hope to open the weird big plus 9999 cactus. With all of that being said, folks, thank you so much for enjoying round 2 of Modern here from the Nerd Rage Gaming home store. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. See you all soon.
bye.
Goodbye.
What I like about the Energy series is how much of a community it feels like.
It's really cool to be able to meet people that share common interests with you and become friends with them and grow relationships.
I'm able to feel a sense of belonging that I don't feel a lot of other places.
Oh man, it's almost indescribable. A lot of regulars who play the series basically all year, it feels almost like a sort of homecoming. I could tell even from like the first time I started playing.
The atmosphere here is very friendly and almost like a family.
It's just a lot of familiar faces.
Real sense of community. It's really refreshing to be able to spend time with people who I haven't seen in a long time.
Even strangers will just be very welcoming.
I've made a lot of really valuable friendships and other connections.
Ridiculously good energy.
There's a really good community here.
They're also encouraging.
The gathering ends up being so good in and of itself, and honestly I think that's the biggest upside of going to the Energy series.
The NRG series is coming to a Midwest city near you.
If you've never been to an Energy before and you're maybe a little intimidated about the main event, I highly recommend coming and checking out the side events. They've got so many awesome side events, and it's a great way to sort of dip your toes in and get a feel for the experience.
Side events are actually, I don't know, maybe a misnomer. They're not really side events. They're still just as competitive as the main event. It's a really great way to boost up your own skill.
They're my favorite part. Friendly, it's a great starting point. The judges who run them are fantastic. Just playing with the convention boosters every time is just so much fun. Like years after they stopped printing them, it made the weekend so much better.
You start running into regular players, they can walk you through the process, start helping you get more comfortable, not just with the event, but with the people at the event.
No matter win or lose, it's a good time.
It's just a great way to like hang out with people. You can watch games between rounds and just have a great time.
The NRG series is coming to a Midwest city near you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to round number 3 here at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store in beautiful, wonderful, snowy, icy Buffalo Grove, Illinois. It's round number 3. Is it Phoenix? It's back. But we've got Richard, known hater of non-basic lands, here in the feature match area, resolving, yeah, it's Aether Vial. I'm Dom Striker. That's Jack.
And I'm really missing that I'm not in this match playing Basic Mountain Aether Vial back. Usually it's me and Richard round 3, and I'm going feeling good about the night, and Rich is almost always the person who goes, "Oh, I love you, but no, you you don't get to win today." And Vial's just so good in this deck.
And I believe Rich, we had to make sure seeing the cards, I believe on straight up mono white, old school D&T, got the cat in the chair. We're going old school, new school, whatever school this is, this cat's back.
I hate to call him Cat Jesus, but he is the Cat Jesus.
That's Cat Jesus right there.
And if you play Ghost Quarter, then you know you're going to be talking to Jesus pretty soon.
Everyone knows if you go to Ghost Quarter, you're going to be talking to Jesus.
And yeah, so same thing we saw last game. Tepper just spending these early turns, trying to fill up the graveyard, trying to figure out what he's going to do against this Vial and this mono white deck that's just obviously going to have a lot of exile interaction to his graveyard suite of threats.
And we said when we watched the version of this deck, the black-white version earlier, does not have Aether Vial anymore and can't gain this quick mana advantage. But here, Richard's going to have it as his way to try to fight back against this blue-red, very tempo-oriented deck. Tepper is going to have this access to his blue-red spells, but Richard's got that Aether Vial to gain that advantage.
And it looks like this Force Negation must have been a draw in these later turns, because otherwise it definitely would have been used to counter this Aether Vial. And it looks like that Faithless Salving coming off, discarding a Demi-Lich to get 2 new cards in the hand.
Yeah, which means Tepper is currently at count 1 so far for this Demi, followed by
The
this
Manamorphose,
spell 2.
the trick that we were talking about earlier, where you can kind of just go, here's a spell, here's a Manamorphose. Oops, my Demi-Lich is 2 mana.
Now, the thing is I think his 4th free spell might be the Surgical Extraction in hand that Richard just doesn't have any cards in the yard.
Yeah, and he really doesn't want to target one of his own.
He could target his own Force of Negation.
Ooh, get that out of here, because now that your opponent has the Vial in play, you know they're mostly creatures, and unless they're playing something like Ephemerate, it's not going to have a lot of targets.
Color me intrigued. We'll find where Tepper goes through the mid of this turn. Faithless Looting spell number 3. He also could have, if he wanted, have floated a blue to make sure he could cast the Lich no matter what. But looks like we found tons of spells. But very important on what is Tepper's second floating color. Tarn down. And discarding the Tarn, knowing that he can't use it because of the Leonin Arbiter.
The Cat Jesus! So yeah,
And another fetch down for Tepper. Yep, makes sense.
I really like using this Faithless Looting. Try to see what you can get. Try to take as much advantage of your resources as you can before making decisions with cards like Surgical.
Dude, you got to bin a Phoenix off the Consider. How does it feel, Tepper? It must be 2-0 tonight.
Feels real good. Now, Cat Jesus looking like it's something out of the past, and sadly, this Demi-Lich is coming back for free just by exiling 4 cards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Richard getting the read on. Tepper went through all those actions to make sure that he got exactly those 4 spells in.
And now he doesn't really even have to worry too much. He can just kind of exile 4 cards out of his graveyard. He has 2 resilient threats. One of them can get exiled, but Rich will have to have the combo of White Card, Solitude, Ephemerate to deal with Brian's board.
And if you like resolving Arc-like Phoenix triggers, you can come to NRG Madison in just a few weeks and play that Sunday Pioneer event where you too could resolve Arc-like Phoenix triggers for 7 to 9 rounds in a row.
And you see that smile on Garrick's face? You could have that smile too. You just got to show up, and you got to go as undefeated as some of the other players who show up.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I think one of my favorite results of all time is the Dom weekend finish where Dom won both
the Dom
events.
Harvey sweep. Yeah.
Yes, that was one of my.
It
favorite
reminds me
things
of
to
a
watch.
Steven Dykeman sweep from a year prior.
Very,
but
very, very well.
And NRG has recently found its 3rd back-to-back winner as Grayson won the last event of 2024 and the first event of 2025. So not counting champs, Grayson also back-to-back 2 events.
Shout out to Grayson. That's an accomplishment.
Richard here slamming the goods, getting this Archon of Emeria and using Aether Vial to get a White Orchid Phantom. And no searching because of the Jesus.
I will say Archon is the best card in Richard's main deck against Brian's deck. It makes all of his spells so much slower. Yeah, you can only do 1. You want to do 3, you want to do 4 for this Demi-Lich, but you really can't. You're staring at this pile of cards in your hand, unable to cast most of them.
So Tepper needs to find a bolt, right? The Archon I is a 2/3, so it's boltable. And if he has anything bigger, like a Lightning Axe and the like, and the hard part is the White Orchid Phantom, also has first strike, so he gets to eat this Phoenix for free.
And there is a world where he finds a second first striking knight, and then he can just sit there with 2 2/2s with first strike. And I will say, first strike's pretty busted when your opponent does not have first strike.
Hey, write that down, folks. First strike, really good when your opponent doesn't have first strike.
There's some goblins for some reason that have first strike, and I don't understand why, but my mice opponent can't attack because they only have 3 toughness, and my goblin is a 3/3 first striker.
Richard is continuing the assault on Tepper's mana, completely unavailable, unusable, alongside the Archon. Just hate piece, hate piece, hate piece, hate piece, all comboing together.
Now Tepper is in this position where Tepper has to just push the damage, and a Cycle Land is gonna close it up. Now I feel like this is how this matchup should usually go game 1, right? Richard, like Brian is trying to do something very hyper focused, and Richard is in a deck where your metagame position is very much so based on hating out graveyard decks like this, hating out hyper efficient decks. And so the ability for Richard just to go, here's my hate pieces, static pressure over time. Brian just wasn't able to do the hyper efficient thing of recycling the Phoenixes, recycling the Demi-Liches, and we saw how that went.
Let's take a peek at that deck list. This is a mono white D&T deck from MTGO Challenge recently. Top 16ing. Very importantly, you're going to see a lot of these similar pieces, things like that Leonin Arbiter, a lot of white tax pieces, and this mana denial in the mana. Cards that could be available are things like Sanctifier Envec. If you got them, you're definitely bringing those in. Spirit of the Labyrinth, Sun Cleanser, Archon of Emeria. If you have access to more, this is the matchup. Like, obviously, Richard's not preparing for it, but those are the resources. Skyclave Apparition, Witch Enchanter, Wrath of the Skies, and Rest in Peace. If those are there too, uh-oh.
So from my perspective, I always look at what do I want to cut first. So I think that in this position, you look at one or two of those vials, one or two of those ephemerates, and you just look at more hate cards. You're trying to make sure that you're not just hyper-focused on trying to flicker things. You're not hyper-focused on any specific game plan. If you trim on a lot of your 4-ofs that aren't as high impact when your opponent's in the play, you can bring in some hate pieces where when they come into play, they do impact the game in such a way where it swings the favor irrevocably in your favor.
I will say, if Richard has these Recruiter of the Guards, I would probably cut them because they can't find the Archon of Emeria because I believe it's a 2/3, which means it's but too big. If that's not the case, obviously disregard Informacion. But if it is, it's important to know. But also, it is a 2/3. So, and the Sanctifiers, if Richard's got access to them, remember exiling all red cards. That would mean if a Phoenix ever touches the bin, it leaves right away.
Now, I'm a maniac, and I have to ask you, is there a world where, because you're playing mono white and you're playing 4 Aether Vials, do you trim a land on the draw?
Yes. I trim a land on the draw all the time.
I think it's a free card that you can cut, and if you draw too many of them, you'll wish you did.
I will say, I cut a land on the draw all the time, which means I didn't do my sideboard mapping.
Yeah. Well, and I will also
that
say
is the classic. I'm at locals, and I need to bring in one more card than I was thinking about.
Yep.
And I cut whatever is the most likely to be tapped land.
Yeah, I love cutting lands. I think that one of the things that you can only do in sideboarding, in deck building, never cut your lands. But when you're sideboarding, if you're trying to bring in low-costed, highly efficient interactive spells, you don't need your 4th or 5th land. You need another interactive spell. So that's how I look at it. Also, this is a goblin speaking very results-based thinking. So take this advice with a grain of salt.
Yeah, if you ever play against me at an NRG and I show you 7 of my swaps, but not the 8th one, it's because I cut a Dark Slick Shores and I'm feeling bad about it. Taking it back down to the gamers, where we got Richard trying to assemble, I'll call it, a hateful machine. And Brian here with the nostalgic rose and blue colored Izzet Phoenix glasses, trying to take it down with a tried and true strat that people loved in Modern, still love in Pioneer. But Brian trying to hold strong. 2-0, down a game here against Richard and mono white Uwoos. It's because of the cat. It's because of the cat, the Leonin Arbiter.
Cat Jesus.
No, the Uwoo's great. Wow, I didn't realize Richard's land. These are on the pretty close to banned from stream list, and I thought it was a face down card. I thought this was the back of his sleeve, not his land. Yeah, these cameras are looking good though. Draenith Magistrate.
And this is a card that Brian just does not want to see. It stops a couple things. So it stops the rebounded salvaging. It also, I believe, can this stop Demi-Lich if it's cast from the graveyard?
Sure can.
So there's a lot of things.
And you can't flashback your Faithless Looting.
Your Demi-Lich can't even let you cast more cards from your graveyard. So this
your
is just
Demi-Lich can't cast out from the yard?
It cascades the hate all the way down.
Yeah, I would love to. Shout out to somebody in chat talking about the first place foils, as I will call them on stream. Would love to see what they look like on the high quality NRG cameras. So if you want to come on out to Wednesday Night Modern and show us which basic you open in your box, come on down, flatten that thing out, and put it on camera.
I'm really excited to see how much the mountains will be, because I would love to be one of those people.
Goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Do they have non-foils?
Oh, that's true. Oh,
sad.
Well, that's kind of sad because you won't see me with the with the first big finish then.
And Brian taking advantage of these cards while he can, Manamorphosing away. Second spell is gonna bay.
The beautiful thing about Manamorphose is even though it feels like it's a free spell because it replaces itself, it is not. It still is just a normal spell that's cast using mana. And this allows him to just chain the bolt into the Demi-Lich for 1.
Good plays, good plays. Big threat in play. Richard with not the most answers. You know, we saw definitely a few. There's a lot that access to these decks. Very importantly, the Demi-Lich. This is the blue threat. So Brian's draw so far is utilizing his blue threat, not his red one, which means he is at least his most advantageous against the Sanctifier and Vec.
And this is why I call this card Hollow One, because I've had games against this deck where I've literally played Graveyard Hate, they get 2 Demi-Liches in play, and it's just a Hollow One at that point. It's not a 4/4, but a 3/3, even if it doesn't have any other abilities, that they get for free is pretty good.
Aviva, can you please bring up Snare Thopter?
That's pretty awesome. Good tech.
As Solitude takes down this Arclight Phoenix. And you might be wondering, this is the spell that Brian just cast. 4 mana, 3/2 Flying Haste. That was immediately exiled by Solitude. And I misspoke. Took care of the Demi-Lich, understanding that Richard won't be able to deal with the Lich if bad things happen, but he can definitely deal with this Arclight Phoenix. So, and a Surgical coming down, targeting the Solitude. Makes sense.
Now, this is...
Ooh, an Enduring Innocence in hand. Okay, Richard.
This is a hand that we really don't want to see if we're Brian. I feel like this Enduring Innocence, as well as these...
Path to Exile.
Path, a callback to win. Path was a modern staple, being played in burn and out of burn decks. That's kind of the evolution of this card, is now we really only see it in Boros Burn.
And Richard with 2 Volatile Fjords up in that hand as well.
Shout out to the Nordic word fjord.
So the mana base will be under attack if Tepper is not careful. And Solitude being removed from the yard, and Solitude number 3 being removed from the deck. Tepper with an Arclight Phoenix in hand, but the question will be, will he run out of threats, or will Richard find answer after answer, starting with this Path to Exile?
I think that Richard really just wants to find a cat Jesus. I'm sure that you trim one in this matchup, right? You probably don't want your full playset, but having at least one in this specific situation forces your opponent to already have a bolt. They've used one already, so the chance of having a bolt left is not very high in their hand. And then if you're able to land a cat Jesus, you get a second Fjord. You go, here's my Ghost Quarter, here's my Ford, hit both your lands. You can't search. If he has a land and cat Jesus next turn, that could be a really powerful sequence.
Slamming this Enduring Innocence, so Richard will hopefully start trying to draw cards from this in the future, and slamming in again with this pro-red threat. The Phoenix being red, but it does have flying. So the two kind of staring at each other and trying to fight back and forth as a Tamiyo gets slammed down here for Tepper. An actual threat that doesn't interact with the yard basically in any way. The minus, kind of, but this is a way that Brian can continue to gain a little advantage, maybe get a Planeswalker, while fighting through all the hate that Richard has. It'd be a real shame if it gets pathed.
I treat Tamiyo the way that I used to treat 5-mana hero Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Don't really care about the uptick, don't really care about the downtick. They're both good. I really care about that ult. If I let them get that ult, the game basically ends.
Yeah. Good heuristic for most Planeswalkers, but especially for these ones with the really, really game-breaking versions.
That path coming down to take that Tamiyo out, so Brian doesn't even have that option to play towards that late game out.
And Richard, because he has the Enduring Innocence with Lifelink as a 2-power Lifelinker, it could almost by itself race the Phoenix, as Tepper's technically only going to be dealing 1 point of damage for each turn cycle, which means Richard has 13 turns to deal more damage than Tepper can do to him.
And the pain, the is it a dog or a goat?
Sheep.
The baby goat shall receive a lightning bolt and then pass on. And
dog, it's a sheep.
It's a sheep. Sorry.
Sound off in chat if you know the difference between a goat and a sheep. As Brian Faithless salvaging. Very importantly, it goes on rebound, which means it's not getting exiled out of the graveyard just yet. Spell number 2 for Brian.
And this game is slowly slipping towards Brian. Like, even though he has a lifelinker, had the lifelinker, right? The game is slowly slipping towards Brian, even though he only has a 3/2 in the air. Like, it's crazy to watch him grind with literally just one creature in play. And Richard has a deck full of answers. can't stop the onslaught.
Richard putting that die on the Enduring to indicate that it has triggered and it's currently on enchantment mode and currently not acting as a creature. Players have many different ways that they indicate this. Is how Richard has chosen today as this White Orchid start to attack Brian's mana base.
Do you take the Hollowed Fountain or the red source?
Great question.
It looks like it was the red source.
I think I would have hit the fountain because there's a mountain in play for Brian. I'm not cutting him off a color by taking the red source, but Richard here going after it anyways, and Tepper with 4 basics in play just does not have another to find, which means Richard, all these cards have strip mine mode unlocked, that he can start going after this mana and knowing that Brian won't find anything.
And now you have a really, really clear decision. You can either, I believe the Fjord can hit any land, or is it non-basic?
Great question.
I think the Fjord might be able to hit any land. And if it can, oh, never mind. I was going to say you could take him off red by hitting this mountain, but untapping and drawing the fetch land, being able to slam that makes all that pretty irrelevant.
There's the thing in the other skies.
Oh, the second white source mattered. Whoa, so that's so impactful. Being able to clear the entire board, all 3s.
And munch on the flipped Enduring, which makes sense now why Brian bolted it last turn.
Yeah.
And then, here comes the Phoenix.
Oh, I remember. It brings me back to the
Holy cow.
days. It feels like every F&M would end with a caw.
And Richard, we know with a second Fjord in hand and draw step, this is the impactful moment. A Ghost Quarter. Information fully unlocked. We think we know it all. Bloop, bloop. Richard going after that
All
mana
these
base.
lands going away. Now, what is that?
And-
What is that card with the dice on it?
That's probably energy.
Energy for sure.
Brian used all of his mana, but not all of his energy.
That makes
So
sense.
netting one in that beautiful photo of him and his little baby daughter. The things they bring him energy. Oh my god. It's a son. I've never met the kiddo, Brian. I'm so sorry. Big shouts to the beautiful baby boy. Taking the game down, tying it up.
Oof.
Oon, the Oon.
Lots of
Brian
lands.
Tepper. Richard, mono white.
It's so hard when you draw lands. There's not much that you can do, but shovel up and you can be on the play now. Take a deep breath, reset. That's my favorite thing to do when I take a loss. Is just tell yourself mentally, I'm starting a new tournament. Deep breath, reset. Let's see how the cards fall.
Give yourself just a little bit. Richard with piles upon piles of cards that are heavily impactful here for this matchup. Brian trying to customize just enough that he can try to push through all of them. That was the game that Tepper was on the play. It's going to get just a little bit harder trying to push through it all again while being on the draw.
Yeah, I think for specifically Brian, his sideboard is extremely lackluster here. Remember, he's got 3 to 4 copies of Moon Effects. He's got some Stifles in the Consigns, Pyroclasm to try to clear the board. But most of those cards don't line up really well with what Richard is trying to do today.
Yeah, I think he brought in the Pyros when we saw him doing a little bit of sideboarding. It makes sense. He's going to try to at least maybe get a 2 or 3 for 1 out of that to deal with some of Richard's creatures. But then we saw that he also brought in that Wrath of the Skies, a big defining moment at the end of that game number 2.
It's true. And Pyroclasm sneakily good against Cat Jesus. I will keep bringing this up because I think that the Leonin Arbiter being the difference in game 1 was also the reason why Richard was not able to get away with that game in game 2. If being able to have a 2/2 cat that turns off your opponent's fetch lands is sometimes the difference between winning and losing the game.
And Richard had a little bit of a learning experience late there in game number 2, understanding that most likely in game 3, he's going to start going after the white sources out of Tepper to stop him, deny him from getting that double white for Wrath of the Skies that took Richard down in game number 2.
It's true. We have to take those L's in order to learn, and that's the beauty of Magic.
And Richard, I'm seeing a beautiful hand, but not any of those blackout lands, and it's quickly being tossed back. Brian with a little bit of an upstairs and keeping that 7.
Yeah, it looks like Brian's got, I think that's a Faithless Looting I saw, and it might be a Pyroclasm actually. The art for looting and Pyroclasm both involve fire.
Yeah, there's a Pyro there on the far
There we
left.
go. It's a Pyroclasm. Okay, so it looks like Brian's got a Wrath, a Pyroclasm, and an Arclight Phoenix might be on this hardcast Phoenix worst case scenario game plan.
Snare Thopter coming in for the second time in a row. And Brian just going to kind of sit by, let Richard take this mulligan or two because Richard has a lot of cards that go really poorly for Brian that he's not going to be mad if Richard has a few less of them.
It's true. And Brian can kind of do this. He can just take a slower game plan. He can say, okay, well, I'll just deal damage over time. A lot of this Phoenix deck is built on having explosive draws, but it can also play a value game plan spread out over multiple turns. And that's the cat Jesus.
Don't worry, it's going to get shot.
Definitely very well.
Because Brian's drop return was Bolt.
There might be a lightning, a strike of lightning.
Tell that to the lightning strike. I want an energy over the. Oh, sorry, sword gun. My bad.
I got one of those, and it literally has the text, the flavor text on the top of the card, shifted over and cut off, so I can't read it. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I was trying to read it, and I was like, why can't I do this?
As the Drannith Magistrate slams down again for Richard, we saw this at the beginning of game number 2. It's interesting because this card is bad for Tepper, but not an absolute lock.
True.
So these players duking it out in the wonderful modern format here every Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Our locals right here at the Nerd Rage Gaming Home Store in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. Right now we got this beautiful mono white D&T. Yes, actual D&T. We're talking cards like Leon and Arbiter and Man Denial versus Is It Phoenix? Faithless Looting, unbanned, recently released, and Brian Tepper trying to unlock the Phoenixes along with the Faithless Looting.
Now let me ask you a quick question. With this Drannith Magistrate on the field, do you think there's any other card that Richard would prefer over this card? Because I think Drannith Magistrate might be the card that he prefers the least in this spot.
Right, of a card that he brings in because it has text on it, but not the most impactful of the hate cards, right?
Yeah.
Most likely more interesting things like an Archon of Emiria or that Sanctifier on Vec. But one of the things about playing a deck like Richard's is it's sometimes not the individual pieces, but putting all of the pieces together to make it as hard as possible for Brian. So going after the mana here, getting a Drannith. That's the thing about this mono-white deck and the black-white versions that's very popular. It's all about putting the pieces together. Each of them kind of does a little on their own, but hopefully do a lot all together.
And it's really nice to see a deck with high synergy still holding up in Modern, right? A lot of the recent power creep in the way the cards are being designed have really pushed things towards individual, card values. Like cards like Tameo is a perfect example of, you don't really need to play a bunch of like synergistic cards. If you just play a bunch of cards like Tameo and a Johnny that take over the game by themselves, you may or may not have a game plan there. But Rich is of the old school motto of, you know what, my cards are stronger together than apart, and his synergy might be able to be enough to win this game. We see a path for the Tameo, and if he can just keep pushing these 2/2s into the red zone, although we do know about that Pyroclasm in Brian's hand.
Right. Importantly, is Drannith a 1-2 or a 1-3?
Believe it's
this Drannith Magistrate might be on the just a booty, a little too big to light on fire.
Yeah, just barely.
I said what I said. Yeah, but Brian, we even saw from the get-go, from the hand that he kept, that he was ready and willing to play this slower game. And now we're kind of deep in the slow game, and the question is, how will it work out?
It is a 1-3, so Pyroclasm would not take that Drannith Magistrate out. Slowly getting in with that limited level body.
Yes. Yeah, these are the games I'm talking about. Sometimes it's very fun, just like, I got 3 power in play. I'm just going to keep turning it sideways until you make me do something. This is Tepper slamming his Lich. This is his something. This is what he's going to try to do. Richard with a single card in hand. Are any of them answers to this massive Demi-Lich? Oh, it is. Yeah, it's an Ephemerate. Thank you for taking that time to grab your Steam Vents. You can get it out of here.
And this might be what Tepper was thinking about. Tepper might have been thinking, okay, do I grab a basic mountain? But then he realized if he has the Ephemerate, I'm okay with him taking a card out of my deck so I don't draw that land.
Yeah, ensuring that he could cast the Demi-Lich, understanding what was going to happen, now getting all these basics online, but the Lich has already been cast.
And
Path? Come on, Richard. Come on.
You see Brian scratch his head there as that was the card to draw in that spot. And
Here comes Snare Thopter. Here it comes. Oh, I'm feeling it. Oh, I'm feeling it.
I mean, I have lost a hardcast Arclight Phoenix before, but I don't know if this will be the spot where it happens.
If I'm Brian, there might have been a non-zero chance that I cut these Rathless guys in game 3 after like understanding the full mana denial that we kind of got away with it in game 2. And now it's, scarily a card in hand with 0 white sources and double white being asked of you.
And I
Oh,
definitely.
you can cast off Manamorphose.
Oh,
That's a part of the reasons. I remember Tepper was talking about that. I'm
that's
so
a very
sorry.
good point. No, that's a good line. I didn't think about.
And Brian down to 7. So we're talking ha ha he he 3-power beatdown. It's not going to take long for them to take out Brian Tepper this game.
Yeah, more like 3-power blocking.
Nope, not the Tamio yet.
Not
Prophetic powers.
not this.
Milieu, says Brian. The secret additional part of Thought Scour. And here's the Tamio.
Yo.
Brian has drawn 2 cards this turn, and here comes the third. And it'll flip Skadee on the Tamio.
Which actually cuts Richard's
clock very significantly.
More than half.
More than half. Instead of doing 3 damage a turn, this Tamio giving a board-wide -1/-0 means only this White Orchid Phantom coming in for 1.
And this surgical.
This is why Brian was milling Richard. He was trying to just get 2 more shots and impactful cards that he could surgical.
And it looks
it's
like
the Path to Exiles.
Yeah, and those might be cards that came out of this. I don't think they're in the side, but they could be in the side if you're in Brian's brain. You're trying to figure out. He probably brought in 4 removal spells, right? Maybe you don't want Path in the main. And he's trying to figure out, okay, what else besides Solitude, which he doesn't have in the yard, can I take out of his deck to reduce his chances of killing all my threats?
Yeah, and now this Phoenix, in fact, is coming back from the yard. Okay.
Now, Brian has to figure out, does he believe that he can attack? And if I'm him, with only 1 damage coming across every turn with this Tamio uptick, I would attack. But it looks like he's deciding to be safe.
I think I also would have attacked, but I think that might have been the only time that we could have, because now this White Orchid's going to be back on D.
Yes.
Which would have allowed this Arclight to kind of act as a free lightning bolt, which a bolt's a bolt.
Yeah, and sometimes that matters. It might not in this game, but sometimes it does matter.
2 Phoenix, 2 Furies. Here we go.
And now attacking into the White Orchid Phantom and
no Bloxies.
Passing.
We'll take that. We take a no Bloxies.
Richard's saying there must be a trick, and even though I can't imagine what the trick is, I'm not going to fall for it. And so he takes the damage and just says, I can race. Passes it back. Brian taking an untap and a draw, looking at a new card, trying to figure out what is it that he's going to be doing about this 2/2 first striker. It eats one of the Phoenixes this turn, it eats another one. The next turn, it looks like he's just decided to ult this Tamio,
Phoenix.
slam these Phoenixes, say, you can try to keep up with this, but I don't think you can. So block a Phoenix, eat a Phoenix to first strike damage, blink it, bring it back, I believe is what he's doing.
Okay.
So he blocked, ephemerated, flickered, brought the creature back out of combat, has the ephemerate on rebound now. On rebound, he's going to leave it in exile. Brian, with that Tamio on 8, this is pretty scary if you're rich. Top deck Ghost Quarter can hit the red source.
Oh, sure can, because it's a Ghost Quarter. Okay, okay.
Extremely good top deck for Rich. Now, facing lethal in the air if he top decks a bolt, but again, not having any mana to cast it. I believe Brian just ults, finds a red source and a bolt, and wins this game. This has been incredibly close between these two.
All right, Tepper, here we go. Oh, yeah, time to count the deck.
And if you're a blue player, this is just what you love to do. You love to ult your Tamio and draw half your deck, and then have your opponent concede right as you finish counting.
Folks, I have the same question of why is Richard not blocking. The only thing that I can put together is he may be under the understanding that Tamio just gives -1/-0
True.
and not gives it to attacking creatures.
That was my thought as well.
Must be what we are under the belief here, that we're not blocking their 2-power first striker.
Because otherwise, it eats the first one, the first attack.
Yeah, these
Then
Phoenixes would have been gone.
Yeah, he would have 0 Phoenixes left at this point in the game.
But-
As is, Brian's got a fistful of cards, and
Because Brian is working under the assumption of how Richard's been acting, right? He has not seen Richard block each time, so he's going to keep pushing. And now we have that Rathless guys off that Manamorphose, taking on the 2-power blockers, getting in there with the Phoenixes. Congratulations to Brian Tepper, maybe snatching a game from the jaws of a really hard matchup and taking it down 2 games to 1 with Is It Phoenix?
exactly what you're talking about came up. The Manamorphose being able to cast that Rathless guys for the win.
Wonderful. How's our backup? Our backup is gone. Folks, I want to let you know that there is tons of great, beautiful, wonderful, amazing things happening here at Nerd Rage Gaming every single day. Wednesdays is Local Modern, happening live here at 6:30 on Wednesdays. Thursday, if you're a Pokemon fan, the competitive Pokemon players who absolutely crush it in the Nerd Rage Gaming area play live here on Thursday nights at 6:30. But if you're a Magic Gathering player, you can play EDH, that Elder Dragon Highlander, as well. Fridays, we're talking Boomer Zoomer, as Haviva will never let me live it down. It's the perfect name for legacy and standard for these Magic players, as well as One Piece. We're hanging big chillin' on Fridays around here. Saturday and loop back into Monday is those nights for Digimon. You can also play that Elder Dragon Highlander on Monday. And Tuesday is playing a little One Piece and a little Lorcana. Try to get all the goods, as many games as possible. More and more seem to be showing up at Nerd Rage all the time. If you're a Flesh and Blood fan, they're starting to get all the goods for that. They got the previews for the Gundam game. I don't know if that's happened yet, but it's probably pretty cool. And if you can't get enough of it, just buy the full art cards from Magic the Gathering Aether Drift. Half of them look like Gundams anyways. Some look like Evangelion cool robots. Some of them look like giant goblins with their eyes bugging out. You never know, but you can pick them all up at nerdragegaming.com. And if you don't see the ones that you're looking for, put them on that wish list. And as soon as they get listed, you get an email, you get a notification, and you can order them. You can order them for pickup at a Nerd Rage Gaming event. You can order for pickup at the local store, or you can get them shipped out to you. If you want the cards, and they're available at nerdragegaming.com, they will get the cards into your hands. With all that being said, thank you all so much for your time. That was round 3. We got the finals incoming ASAP. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Bye. What's up, gamers, and welcome to round number 4 here at the Nerd Rage Gaming Home Store in beautiful, snowy, icy Buffalo Grove, Illinois, right here out of the back room. It's me, Dom Stryker, alongside Jack.
What's happening? How y'all doing?
And pay no attention to the words that you see on the screen. These are not their decks. We're going to figure out along the way. Ryan is playing, I believe, Black-White, and Z is playing, I believe, as he said, when I heard him earlier, he referred to it as this deck. So we're going to find out along the way. So far, we got Sultai, and we got a Frog off this Malevolent Rumble, and a Grizzy B.
I saw Goryo's Vengeance in his hand.
Grizzy B? You saw Goryo's?
I saw
We
Goryo's.
spent this whole night, and I didn't look at a Goryo's deck? What the heck?
Yeah, there's too much Phoenix to look at anything else.
I can't believe this. I can't believe that. No, that looks perfect to me so far. We got a Frog. These players undefeated. This is the finals of this week. Weekly Nerd Rage Gaming Home Store Modern every Wednesday live right here, 6:30 p.m. Twitch.tv/NRG Store and YouTube.com/Nerd Rage Gaming.
This hand is stacked. It's Goryo's Vengeance Frog, Agatha's Soul Cauldron, a Seiju. There's one other card and a land.
Hey, let's talk about putting a Grizzlebrand under an Agatha Soul Cauldron.
Oh baby, I think that I'm in.
Now the important part is I imagine that there's going to be a little bit of reliance on using mana. This White Orchid's going to make that a little bit more difficult. And we have to recognize that he is going to need Grizzlebrand to actually connect to gain some life, or we might be able to get a lot of cards, but not a lot of life. So this can be very important moments here.
Yeah, and hitting your opponent's land on turn 2 is probably the pivotal turn. Your opponent's going to untap with 3 mana. They're going to have the ability to go 1-drop and 2-drop, or possibly just play a 3-drop. And being able to siphon off a little bit of their options here by taking them off that either blue or black source, depending on what your opponent takes off of this search. It's really important just to, like, Ryan doesn't have a lot of interactive points on turn 2. What he can do is try to make his opponent's turn, the following turn, as hard as possible.
I have now added another set of basics to the impossible to parse on stream list. We got these beautiful Midnight Hunt blackouts here from Z, but it's a forest, it's an island, current available mana.
Thankfully,
we got the Soul Cauldron, munch on that Grizz, munching on that Grizzlebrand, and now this Eldrazi sign is a 1/2, pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. And down we go.
I think that this might be a good time
One card at a time.
You might even do it another time just to put cards in the bin. There is a world where Ryan untaps and just hardcasts a bog here, but if Ryan doesn't have a bog, putting a bunch of cards in the graveyard for this Agatha's also. I see an Ulamog. I see the new Ulamog with Annihilator X, where X is the greatest CMC of a card in exile.
Currently
that you
7,
own.
thanks to this Grizzlebrand in exile now.
That seems pretty strong. And if
now this Scion's just a 1/2, but boy does it have an ability.
the ability to attack has quite an ability.
And it can sack for a colorless. These are all big modes on this little spawn, and I'm sure that's all it's gonna do.
Yeah, and I think moving to discard, just trying to put cards in the graveyard, putting this Ulamog in the graveyard so that they can end step, fetch for a Surveilland, try to set up the draw, untap, and then have access to that Goryo's Vengeance, getting that Ulamog back, wiping Ryan's board, and winning the game.
Ryan using the backside of a Witch Enchanter here because he has an Aven Interrupter in hand, kind of one of the few interaction spells for on the stack out of this Orzhov deck. And because there's a few other flash sleds, Ryan is able to leave this up, but still telegraphing a lot of info by literally bolting himself to get this land per turn into play.
Yeah, sometimes taking the damage isn't what you want to do, especially if you're down on life. But in a deck like the Sultai Reanimator deck, you're going to have such explosive turns that you're going to recoup that value that you've lost and potentially just win the game on the spot as fast as possible.
Here's an end step Goryo's sacrificing the ever so powerful spawn because we're bringing back a copy of Ulamog.
I would say yes, and that's why Ryan is considering conceding. Ryan is flipping his cards, trying to figure out if he has an answer,
Yes.
and he does. He has the Aven
Well, what's going to happen is because we're on end step, if Ryan counters it with the Aven and plots it, Z is going to untap, recast the Gorios, which will still give the creature haste and still be able to rumble through combat this turn.
and I believe that the last card in C might have another land in their hand.
Yeah.
They looked at so many cards, they discarded the ones they didn't want. What are the chances that they didn't leave themselves with any extra mana? Because if there isn't an extra mana, they can't do that line.
Oh, here's a white orchid going after the mana.
Oh, there might be one basic left in this deck.
Yeah, Ryan is kind of on a little bit of an information exploratory mission of learning a little more about what his opponent may have in deck.
Fail to find the land. This
Important.
makes this Goryo's almost uncastable now.
Thankfully, it's cast for freezies because it's been plotted.
Ooh, that's a good point.
So the will has exactly his 2 mana in play right now that he'll be able to use to pay for that cost. And Ryan is just hoping he doesn't do it.
I mean, sometimes you look at your opponent, they're playing hyper powerful modern cards. You just gotta hope.
Well, speaking of which, here's the Gorios.
Well,
Here's the Ulamog. That Grizzlebrand's in exile, so count is 7. Here's your, I think, like 15 power Annihilator 8 Ulamog.
living true to the Eldrazi Titan name, coming down into your opponent conceding out of respect.
And because the Ulamog gets the +1/+1 counters from its ability, it gained the Grizzlebrand ability there for a moment because of the Cauldron. Oh, you gotta love it. Hey, big shouts. You resolve a Goryo's Vengeance, you're A-OK in my book. We're gonna see this list here. This ain't it, though. Yeah, this one's got Cauldrons. This one's going wild. Shout out to whoever did play this deck. I'm loving it. Oh. They won 3 in Portland. Big
Okay,
shout.
what I would do to make that deck this deck, what I would do is I would take out the Archaeologist. I know you love him. Put in Malevolent Rumbles.
The Rumbles, that's a good spot
Put in
for
the
Rumble.
Rumbles, and then the rest of this is pretty similar. You take out the Faithful Mending, you put in Faithless Looting, you trim some of these reprieves.
Yeah, Z might also still have these Griffs. He is playing Cauldron.
Yeah.
So a lot of just cool pieces to look at of what is available. This sideboard is a hot mess, and I'll be honest, I'm not really. Now, you want to talk about one cool thing. I love talking about some Goryo's tech. We got a Mirko Vosk in the sideboard, and the reason being is that it's a Goryo's-able threat that if you play against Mono Blue Belcher, you make them grind until they find 4 basics, they never will. And so your Goryo's that can auto-mill out a Blue Belcher player.
It's true. Shout out to one of the original Demir cards.
Yeah,
from way
Mirko
back
Vosk.
then.
Gotta love it. A card that I still love to this day. But check out this deck. It's pretty cool, but we're no longer looking at it. And an Orzhov mid-range deck. Yes, check out these sideboard cards. We're talking things like Adranith Magistrate, White Orchid Phantoms, Ketramos, March of Otherworldly Light, Surgicals, Pest Control, March, Wrath of the Skies, Relic of Progenitus, Stony Silence. Okay. This is clearly a version of this deck. Now, this isn't Ryan's exact. We're showing you a nice little example that's done well recently. But every single card in Ryan's sideboard that has the word graveyard on it is a coming in. If it's 4 relics and a surgical extraction, sheesh, best of luck out there. But any number of these cards, or we saw from Rich earlier today playing the Sanctifier and Vec, any of those cards that can help combating cards in the graveyard are going to be huge. And remember, there are, in this example, 7 main deck graveyard hate spells in the form of Emperor of Bones and Bogart Trawlers. Some number of those Ryan's me rocking as well. Whoa, this version has Dothy! Okay, I did see this version before. I do miss Dothy Voidwalker. Really a card that fell off after its scam days, but sheesh, Louise, there could be so many main deck cards on top of the sideboard. Ryan's going to have at least some of them.
And I hate to say it, but I think this is a matchup where you trim on Phalia and you probably trim on some of your more slow, grindy mid-range cards because you're really not going to have that opportunity against the Reanimator deck.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision, right? Because you could assemble the lock of Phalia Bogart Trawler and flicker it every turn, or Phalia and your Emperor Bones every turn. What's so fun is if you Emperor of Bones your opponent's Ulamog, and then you cast it, and it sees itself in exile first, and then literally, if Ryan draws any of these Emperor Bones, he can throw Zvi's own threats back at him. And if that's not Magic the Gathering, I don't know what is.
And that would be exactly how Richard Garfield intended it. You take your opponent's cards and you beat them to death with them.
And sometimes it feels like you literally throw it at them. Oh, yeah. Oh, look at these players. They're smiling. They're having a great time. We're smiling, having a great time. Thank you all so much for joining. This is the finals of Locals here at the Nerd Rage Gaming Home Store. Modern, every week, 6:30, right here. Wherever you're finding us, we'll be here again. Game number 2, Zvi with this Sultai Reanimator deck up a game, threw a Grizzlebrand in the Cauldron and put it on Eldrazi Scion. Only things that you can catch right here.
What a way to end a game in 2025, and we get to quickly look at the deck.
We got Molt Tenders?
Yeah, Molt Tenders, Twist. It looks like, what's the blue-black discard 2 and then, or just draw
Tainted
one?
Indulgence?
Yeah, Tainted Indulgence.
Yeah.
And I also saw, I think, the 3-mana pay X life. Each creature gets -X/-X.
Oh, a Toxic Deluge?
I saw
those would be big in this matchup.
I saw a Toxic, so I think that might have been what he boarded in.
Okay, sick. I love a good visible shuffle, really. Really lets us get that peek. All right, gearing up, grabbing these 7s.
Yeah. I think that this is definitely a matchup where both players, you can't really mulligan to your sideboard cards, right? You need them to be in your opening hand. Both of your game plans are very focused on what you're trying to do. Ryan needs to make sure he has his lands so he can advance his mid-range game plan, and then you just got to make sure if you're a Reanimator player, you got to get something in the bin, and you got to protect it.
Yeah, both players have very different intentions of what they're doing, but both are more or less going to try to stop the other. Zvi by stopping the game altogether, and Ryan by trying to interact with that graveyard even a little while pushing his value. Surveil, oh yeah, Entomb incoming?
I was going to say half a card right here.
Yeah, until it bins on a Traxo or a Grizzly Bee or an Ulamog or a Mirko Voss.
Then it might as well be an Ancestral Recall is what it feels like when your opponent just flips the Atraxa into play.
Oh, I think that was a Grizzlebrand. Oh, I think it was a
Oh,
Grizzlebrand.
we can't see it.
Oh, I think it was.
it.
Aviva, it's just off screen. Can we see if that's a Grizzlebrand that got milled? Oh, never mind. It's coming into play.
It is.
Never mind. Here it comes. Oh, jeez.
I would say that has to be the only reason why he would just instantly cast this Goryo's Vengeance. And
Incredible.
it is the demon himself.
I joked about Entomb, but it wasn't a joke.
Sometimes in life, you make jokes, and then it comes true.
Oh, yeah. Ask my parents. Here we go. Big rips coming out of Zvi. Spending that life, getting it back right away. Drawing bangers like Molt Tender and Fetch lands. Well, really just a lot of lands, but I think it's just because he has a lot of cards.
Yeah, I think at this point, same thing as the other game. You're kind of just going to the end step and putting cards in your graveyard.
Here's that Felia from Ryan. On Tippity Tappity. Yeah, Zvi's got to clean up his hand a little. Fetch lands, those can go. And then
not putting the Ulamog. Okay, I was gonna say not putting the Ulamog in the graveyard could be a consideration to like being scared of a relic or a Soul Guide Lantern and trying to save it so you can do it all at one turn.
Yeah, I think Zoo is kind of debating because they have copies of Psychic Frog in hand that they want discard availability, that they do have that out of those frogs, but just taking the opportunity just to shove it into the bin right away.
Yeah, and we're going to see one of the new Aether Drift cards, Molt Tender here. Something that's been considered, I don't want to say considered, but something that's been compared to Deathrite Shaman.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
At least the mana part, it's graveyard hate for your opponent, and it ramps you.
Ryan here kind of assembling the 1-2 punch that these Orzhov decks are built on. The Felia Overlord, the Balemark synergy, allowing you to flicker this Overlord, gain a lot of value, dig super deep in your deck. Picked up a Recruiter off the first one, probably Ketramos off the second. And it's taking the Bogart, the Buggy Trolley.
Sometimes the best pick is a Goblin, and I love it. I love when I can see my opponents play Goblins unironically.
Yeah, the Trawler's just good. ETB on a 3-1 Bajuka Bog ability. Oh, yeah.
And you can bolt yourself to play a land, which is the hidden mode that sometimes you need.
Here is that Molt Tender. Ryan giving that a read as Psychic Frog alongside it. Big, powerful turn number 3 out of Zvi.
Might just be putting bodies on the board.
Put the bodies on the board. Put the bodies on the board.
Yeah, just have honestly, if you're not having fun playing Magic, come down to the Nerd Rage Gaming Store. We always have a great time here, and we'd love to have a great time with you.
You too can 3-0 with Molt Tender in your deck, Orphelia or Psychic Frog. There's options. You can choose the lane that works best for you, and then push it to the limit, and you end up just like this.
And it's kind of interesting to see the evolution of the MH3 cards, right? Just like slowly, like this Felia Blink deck, it has existed. The cards have been out. The Overlords were the newest additions, I believe, and people just haven't, really put it together. Been too focused on Boros and other decks, but
right.
finally looking at these MH3 pieces and say, well, what happens if we do this? And funny enough, when you test new things, sometimes you find cool things to do.
Here comes a recruiter, the guard. Ryan's going a hunting, going a searching, finding Solitude.
That was the fastest tutor I've ever seen. That's
Oh,
like
yeah.
me grabbing a ringleader. It's like, slam that.
A lot of these recruiter, the guards do kind of have search for Solitude written on them and sometimes other options. But this allows Ryan, if he needs to deal with the frog or deal with the big giant threat. And Ryan gets to blink the recruiter. So if he doesn't have a white card he wanted to get rid of, he can find one off the second search off this recruiter. As the frogs get in front of the dog.
Double pump on the frog, allowing it to eat the dog.
Solitude and Solitude milled off that Overlord, so Ryan picking up one of them.
An embarrassment of Solitudes here.
Probably a Dranith Magistrate. Color me intrigued. Pitching it to the Solitude.
I feel like that might be a consideration to Ryan's hand. He might have either another one or so much hate that he doesn't even know what to do with all of it.
Yes. I just think Dranith Magistrate might not have any text in this matchup.
And that might be an oversight. That might be something where Ryan is thinking that the card does something that it doesn't actually do. Or, he might just have something that's so bad game one, he has to take it out.
Yes. We can see Ryan still waiting on the delayed flicker of the recruiter. Rumbling on in. Opponent down to 13. Here's the recruiter search. Ryan has already seen 3 of his Solitudes. Does he need to see the 4th? Quick search. Oh, back to the top. Heading on down again.
It might be that there's one in exile or that
Bones. Oh, it is Solitude. Getting that 4th.
it's the old border. It tricked him. He was like, oh, it's a different card, right? Wrong.
Yeah, come on, wrong.
I will say, after, when we get to round 4, sometimes the cards do start to blend together. You just got to make sure that you take a deep breath, take it slow. You're the only one rushing you. When you're playing Magic, it's your game. Have fun. Enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise, it's not a game.
And I'm just reminding myself that Ryan does have this Bogart Trawler in hand. Chose to do many other things with his turn number 3. Did not need to go after the graveyard just yet.
True.
And this Emperor of Bones might make it a little difficult.
I think, again, a tell to Ryan's hand. He might be so enamored by the riches that he has, and he's starting not to put the steps together to get to, how do I keep my opponent from winning? Might be too focused on himself winning.
Yep, here's a Molten activation, doing the DRS mode, casting this Emperor Bones.
Yeah. I mean, that's very strong.
And picking them up.
That looks like it's it. Yeah, so just a great job of Ryan making sure that you have a Solitude for every threat your opponent has.
Just put all 4 Solitudes in your hand. You'll beat your Reanimator opponent.
It's truth. It's truth. If you don't believe, try it.
You gotta check it out. We just saw it. You just need that little bit extra, but now we get to go into a wonderful game at 3. In fact, do have these Grists. I see them.
I think that Grist is probably the best backup plan that you could possibly have in the deck. I don't, and it looks like they came out. Force of Vigor, Consign in Memory, Fatal Push, Agatha's, Endurance. I don't know about Endurance. I think maybe Endurance could be playable as just like an attacker.
Okay, I'm not sure if those are coming in or not. They looped back and forth a few times.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's the Endurances or something else, but I would love to see some Endurances here. Just surprise Ryan, attack with a 3/3, flash in my 3/4, and eat your 3/3.
Yeah, the most important part might just be the flash 3/4. Ryan getting a little bit of interacting in this graveyard. Overlord is the old school templating, not the new school, in which I say that it mills and you pick a card in your graveyard and return it to your hand. So if you don't have a graveyard, it won't have anything to find. Whereas there are some modern cards such as Philology that'll say like mill 3 and choose 1 from among those that are milled, which allows you to choose a card even if it goes to a different zone. But the Overlord's got that old school style. So Endurance won't be able to interact because Overlord will always be in the midst of a resolving trigger.
Yeah, it's crazy.
but can clear the yard.
It's crazy when all of the effect is in one paragraph, you can't interact. When the effect is broken up over multiple paragraphs, you can.
Or there's intervening ifs.
True. Clauses. So many clauses.
When you do's, there's so many things that the deeper you get into the game, the more you learn all the little tiny moments that you can kind of stab your knife through to get things to work just at the time you want.
As we saw in the Is It matchup or mirror, where, knowing when you have priority is the most important thing. I actually talked to Kai after that round, and Kai said, yeah, I forgot he had priority then. And that makes sense. Yeah, being able to just play to your outs and then knowing if your opponent even has a window to respond, very important.
Big deals, big deals. These players shuffling up here for game number 3 of our final match at our weekly Wednesday Night Modern. Sultai Reanimator doing some busted, beautiful Gorios and Agatha's Soul Cauldron stuff versus Ryan Reynolds on the new hotness around these streets in this Orzhov mid-range. Blink, Taxes, Ketramos, whatever you want to call it. It's all the good black-white cards. A lot of them with an MH in their printed cost, but hey, you combine them all together and give yourself a big old god from the big old race, and you're off to the races.
And I think that a lot of these new cards are going to slowly trickle their way into Modern. A card I've been really impressed with is Dredger's Insight. Do you know Dredger's Insight?
Dredger's Insight slaps.
Oh my god.
Currently being played in Yawgmoth.
I was going to say, that card's Malevolent Rumble, but it doesn't give you a Scion, and it doesn't pick up just any permanent. It just picks up a specific permanent. But for Standard, that's pretty close. And so read this card and tell me if you think this is Malevolent Rumble.
I do want to pick it up with my fear
of missing out.
Nope. Isolation.
Yeah.
I want to pick this up with my bouncer.
When
I want to play like Bant Pixie and pick up Dredger's Insight over and over.
When you exhaust a Draconautics engineer and you bring back 2 Afterburner experts and they get haste and you swing for 8 with haste, chef's kiss.
I've been thinking about the Afterburner expert, but I've been thinking if there's ways you can play it without the red cards.
Yeah.
And play it as like an infinite blocking engine as opposed to as an aggressive engine.
Yeah.
A 4/2 blocks the heck out of things.
It's true. And it's especially good when you're able to discount the exhaust ability or just put counters on it like in another way. Like you have an Agatha's, you bring it back, you exile one of their things, it's a 5/3 now.
And we are off to the races. V getting this fetch land into play. Ryan playing a Surveillant. I wonder what V's on the hunt for. Probably Surveillant. Welcome to the new turn 1 of Modern. If you don't have a 1-drop, you always have half a consider in searching for these Surveillants.
And these lands used to be Triumphs, and then before that they were Shocklands, and just the slow evolution of mana fixing over time.
I haven't seen a Triumph in
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Remember Triumphs?
Oh,
as an Ulamog hits the bin off the turn 1 Entomb Z here again. And Gorios is a card at the top. You can't believe it. He had one in hand already, but it's way cooler that the one on top happened. And Ryan's looking at his hand. Oh, none of those sure do look like a Solitude.
And it looks like this is going to be an end step Ulamog.
Yes, so I think Z is going to pitch cast an Endurance to try to get a card in exile so that Ulamog actually gains Annihilator. I think that's kind of the patterning here. But instead, passing the turn back, taking their time. You got to love a patient player.
I think that this leaves the most room for Ryan to, tip his hand. Right now, you haven't seen enough information to know if Ryan has a Solitude. You're going to try to play in such a way to get Ryan to show you what is available.
Show me what you got.
Show me what you got.
That's why I love Thoughtseize and any of these like shove sort of style of combo decks that I just want to take a peek before I shove, right?
Yeah. That peace of mind can be the difference between going and not going, and that can win you the match.
Oh, yes. An Orcish Bowmaster coming down here for Ryan, a card that's fallen out of favor, but still sees a little bit of play here in these black-white decks.
This is a card that does counter the Grizzlebrand pretty effectively. If your opponent draws 7, you just dome them or kill their Grizzlebrand.
You shoot the Grizzlebrand. The Grizzlebrand takes 7 damage.
But, unfortunately, does not do anything against this Ulamog, which will probably be coming back at the end step if Ryan taps out for something. Something.
Yeah. I think Zvi here is about to hard cast a pretty good blocking Endurance.
That's a very good point.
Will Ryan sniff it out?
Ryan says, here's my 2 1/1s that are going to win this combat race, and I don't know if that's going to work.
Ryan also has the Bogart Brawler, or
Trawler.
So because he kind of baited this out of Z, not knowing, but still doing so, Ryan could in second main play that out and exile this Ulamog out of the yard since V does not have access to it.
It's true.
But 1 mana we're ephemerate this Orcish Bowmaster instead, sending a little damage upstairs and beefing up this Orc army to deal just a little bit more.
Yeah, it'll total up being 3 damage coming through, and you save the Bowmasters. So just a good play all around by Ryan to try to make sure his threats stay in play. Now he doesn't have the mana to play the Trawler like you said. This is very impactful because this will give his opponent the opportunity to untap, play a land, and do whatever they want.
So currently, the Ephemerate is in exile, so the Ulamog could get Annihilator 1. Just one. Just a little Annihilator as a treat.
We've seen
and here it is.
We've seen Annihilator 1 is good enough.
Bonk.
I mean, that token's going to be not long for this world. However, you don't want to sacrifice one of your lands. And Ryan's really asking what he wants to do. Another Bowmaster, perhaps?
Or you got that dog in him.
Ophelia.
Get that Orc army out of here. Sacrifice that thing. The nice thing about Orcish Bowmaster is it recreates that token if your opponent ever draws any extras.
Yeah, you just have to wait for your opponent to draw those cards with that Grizzlebrand in.
Now, we didn't toss nothing in front of that Ulamog. It has protection or trample or something, right?
It has a billion keywords. One of them has to be good.
Yeah, there must be a reason why we did not block the Ulamog.
It might just be a race. It might just be him saying, I can't, deal with this one turn. It's like a Through the Breach Emrakul, right? I'll take 15. Can I survive?
It is very similar to a Through the Breach Emrakul.
The newest one, the Defiler, I believe.
Ulamog the Defiler.
Perfect. Yeah, so Ward Sack 2 Permanence is the only keyword it has.
Yeah, so it's just big.
Yeah. And Ryan might be just saying, I don't care. I can deal with the next big fatty that you put into play, but I can't deal with that one.
Here comes a Recruiter. Recruiter always on the hunt for a Solitude. And bingo, bango, immediately grabbing that.
He wanted to get out of his hand. He was like, that was too strong. I don't want to hold this card. I want to play it. And this Valia, being able to reset this Recruiter is going to mean, I don't want to say it's lights out. It's very close to getting this game pretty much locked up for Ryan, where you're able to grab a Solitude every single turn. Your opponent has limited resources because they're missing their land drops.
Here's a Rumble. Delta, Tainted, Frog, land.
I think that it's definitely land or frog. It depends what your hand is.
I think Z already has a frog or two, so interested in picking up this land in the form of Watery Grave?
Why not blink the Recruiter over the Bowmaster?
I believe the Recruiter was not in play yet.
Yeah.
Could have been an option that was available. May have just been doing classic Magic player behavior of go to combat first before doing anything else, but may have been able to gain some value out of flicking a Recruiter. Totally agree.
Yeah, we're conditioned to always go to combat, force our opponent to, do what they're going to do to our creatures, and then take our actions, because if they have some way to interact with our spells, we want to make sure they choose either kill the creature or counter our spells.
Here is an Overlord. Again, going to put together the synergy of Felia and the Overlord. Grabbing a... Ryan's a-thinking. Options in Witch Enchanter, Recruiter, Felia, Ketramos, and any other cards in the bin throughout the course of this game. Grabbing. Thinking. Grabbing second Recruiter.
You kind of want to Ketramos here, but I think that the Recruiter is probably...
I like grabbing Witch Enchanter. Play Witch Enchanter as your land.
Yeah. You can...
but Ryan's at 7? Oh, I guess tap land it is.
You really don't want to play that Trawler, so you're definitely going to play this as a tap land.
Oh, and a Ketramos already in hand, so no need to pick up a Ketramos.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Ryan's trying to apply as much pressure as possible. Here in this pivotal game number 3 between these two players. Pitching the Ketramos in hand to play out a Solitude.
Leading it off with the Solitude.
Pitching 2 fatties for Z into the Psychic Frog before it gets Solitude away. A Grizzlebrand and an Ulamog making their way into the yard.
Gaining just a little bit more life, trying to maximize the effect of that Solitude in a positive way, even though it is a negative overall.
And the Witch Enchanter taking the damage, playing it untapped, slamming the Trawler munch on that whole yard out of Zvi. Ryan taking perfect actions to make Zvi want to discard those creature cards and then eating them all. And here goes Felia into the rumble zone, flickering that Overlord. Endurance eating the Felia, 3-3 versus 3-4. Now this Overlord re-entering. Oh, I taking that Emperor out of bounds. Or the Solitude.
I don't know if it matters, but did the Philia get a counter because it blinked the Overlord?
It gets the counter when the thing comes back, so
When it
that's
comes
why
back. That makes sense.
that's why the combat was a little disadvantageous. But both players making actions. Ryan is pulling ahead very quickly. Zvi in the final moments of the game here, slamming a frog. But because this takes both of his black sources, Zvi's remaining cards in hands are Grizzlebrand Goryo's, but no third source of mana to pitch and slam with this Grizzlebrand. So instead, just looking at the board out of Ryan Reynolds and trying to survive to next turn.
And Ryan doesn't know this, but if Ryan swings out, forces the blocks, and then is at a low enough life total, as long as you don't attack with that Bowmaster, if your Grizzlebrand comes back.
Well, the Grizzlebrand just will be a hasty 7-power
Oh, it's
flyer.
true. It just attacks. It doesn't even activate.
It'll be a 7-power flying lifelink haster. So Zvi's plan is to survive.
Yeah, now he doesn't have the Phallia to blink the Trawler. This is really interesting.
Here's the Overlord attack.
Okay.
Taking an Aven Interrupter. And I think that's it. That was that final piece. Ryan's got a Solitude white card and Interrupter.
Being able to time walk your opponent's best spell, or in this case, their only spell, is going to be very impactful, especially when you're ahead on board.
Oh, the Solitude's been baited out. The Solitude's been baited out. And Ryan's tapped out.
Discards
That's
the
a Grizzlebrand
Grizzlebrand.
into the yard. Here we go. It's gonna happen.
Go, go, go.
He's about to throw this Grizzlebrand at Ryan. Here we go. Untap. Goryo's. Grizzy B throws it at Ryan.
And that's the match.
Cow.
Wow.
Saki. Big shouts. Big game. Good work. Yes.
That's it. That was an amazing match. Well played by both of these players. Playing to each other's outs and making sure that they don't lose. The last minute having the Grizzlebrand, forcing out the Solitude, baiting it with the block. And wow. That was amazing.
Z, congratulations, taking it down 4-0 here on the night here at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store. Wow, Z, Zowie. Y'all see all that happening. And if you want to check out even more Magic, we are always going to be live here Wednesdays at 6:30. And if you want to play Magic, you can stop by Madison, Wisconsin. The Saturday event's going to be a 10K Standard Showdown. That means if you win, you qual for champs and get a wonderful token made just of you. And Sundays, you got that 5K Pioneer Trial. Come on out and play the format being represented on the Nerd Rage Gaming Championship Series. If you want to look at additional events in May, we're back here in the Chicagoland area playing Modern and Standard. And end of June in Indianapolis, the Standard Showdown. And do not adjust your screens. That is 10K Final Fantasy Team Sealed Showdown. Double Showdown week there at the end of June to capstone Season 1 of the NRG Championship Series.
Always a lot of fun, always a great time. Good to see the competitors and friends when you go out. It's one of the best things about Magic is the gathering, as ironic as it is to say.
Please stop by nerdragegaming.com if you play games of any type in any way, shape, or form. Know that they can be sold and bought here from the lovely folks at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store booths by the lovely folks that are running this fine establishment that we get to stream out of. It's all about the Digi, it's all about the Magic, it's all about the gathering, it's about finding the one piece. It's about Boomer Zoomer nights on Fridays. There are options on options to play games here at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store. We're talking Wednesday night Modern. Thursday, they'll be live here again tomorrow at 6:30 for highly competitive Pokemon gameplay off the wonderful folks here out of the Nerd Rage home store, as well as you can play Elder Dragon Highlander. Friday got that Boomer Zoomer night, as well as that support for One Piece players. We got the Saturday to Monday Digimon Loop Skidoo, along with that Elder Dragon Highlander, and Tuesday One Piece and Lorcana. If there's a game and you want to play it, you can find it right here, Buffalo Grove, Illinois, at the Nerd Rage Gaming home store. Thank you all so very much for joining us for this lovely Wednesday night stream. This has been Jack. Jack, thank you so much for joining us in the booth.
Thank you for having me in the booth. It's always a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to watch watch the Energy stream. Energy is one of my favorite stores. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And just as Jack said, it's not just about the magic, it's about the gathering. Thank you all so much and have a good night.